Welcome to Sanity Lounge. This week we have Amanda Davis. Amanda is someone who's always been fascinated by the stories and talents of others. Her career as a nurse for over 17 years has allowed her to connect with people from all walks of life, guiding them through challenges and helping them grow. With a background in psychology, nursing, and leadership, plus certifications in life, health, and career coaching, Amanda has made it her mission to help others find their path to happiness. She is deeply rooted in Baltimore, where she lives with her husband, me, and 2 boys. When she's not coaching or connecting with others, you'll find her enjoying live music, binge watching TV, and definitely eating tacos on Tuesdays. This September, we're focusing on raising awareness for suicide prevention. Join us as we connect, support, and uplift each other on this journey toward better mental health and well-being. So let's dive in. Welcome, Baltimore. We have a kind of a public service announcement episode. So we're doing things a little bit differently for this episode. We have my lovely and beautiful wife, Amanda, on the show.
Amanda Davis, baby.
And we are going to discuss a very important topic of suicide prevention. And because September is Suicide Prevention Month, so we're going to we'll have some fundraisers and things on our social media pages, but we'll get into that a little later. But yes, so welcome.
Right.
And,
well, I'm going to say one thing real quick. We're going to try to thread a very delicate needle, of a very important taboo, as it usually is, subject that we've all chewed similar dirt about. And Amanda is a professional.
yes.
And September's here, and it's important.
It's a topic that hits very close to home for me and you as well.
Yep.
So welcome, babe.
Amanda Davis, take it away.
Welcome, Amanda.
Well,
Let's let's start off with let's just go into talk about yourself. Let our viewers know what you're all about and what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. I appreciate this. I will say that when the Jaws episode aired,
Nice.
what does Jaws have to do with this, right?
It's all right. I love
I can
that.
make the connection. I can do
I
it.
love that. Go.
Since you guys are all about these special episodes, I got to thinking, well, heck, if they want to talk about Jaws, which did make me watch the movie for the first time, which I'm embarrassed to
It
admit.
is important, right? Jaws is
Jaws
important.
is very important.
Right.
It really got me thinking, and I was like, wow, why not be able to use this platform for some other things?
Right.
And then, of course, thinking of the name Sanity Lounge got me thinking even a little bit more, and I breached the topic to Davis and said, hey, why don't we take an opportunity in the month of September to release just a little special, little short little episode just to remind anybody out there that's listening that September is Suicide Prevention Month. And I'll get more into that. But, really just reminding people to check on themselves, check on each other.
Check on your friends.
Normalize these conversations. Talk about it. Don't dance around it. Ask people if they're okay.
Right.
And that's kind of how this got to this point today.
Well, and then she then texted on the thread, what I thought about it. And I am always, I love leaning into controversial subjects because we've all, we have deep stories in most venues.
Right.
And I think that it is important.
Very.
And so I was like, okay, I didn't even know September was suicide. I got awareness. I had no idea.
This is already working.
Yeah,
we have one more person that is aware.
Yeah.
So when you said that, you said that you had recently, refreshed on a seminar or something had, the subject for whatever reason has been paramount in your mind.
Yeah.
And so why not? I think it's a good.
Right.
We're trying to do good, so let's do good.
Yeah,
That's
let's
what we
do some good.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Just
start off telling us a little bit about yourself.
My history with the idea of working in a space of behavioral health, mental wellness, well-being, started a really, really long time ago. I worked on a crisis hotline when I lived in Florida. Yeah. Back in 2020. So started there. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. But I worked on a crisis hotline as a telephone operator. Did that for a while while I was going to college. Didn't really do so much college at
That
university.
wasn't back in 2020. That was back when we lived in
Oh,
Florida.
I'm sorry. You're right. It was
Yeah, let me
20, like with no extra two.
Yeah,
It was
she
the
lived in
2000s.
Tampa at the same time we lived in Florida.
Yeah.
Well, Christ, that was 99.
Yeah. Why-
99 and
yeah.
2000.
Y2K baby. Yeah. So all the way back then I had an interest in being involved and immersed in this environment. Fast forward, didn't really do so much college at University of South Florida, and that's a whole nother story.
Sure. We'll have an episode.
We'll have another episode about that, but it could make me uncredible.
Right. It'll knock down your credibility.
Correct. It could be a
Those
problem.
tails get out.
Right. Ended up coming back to Baltimore, went to nursing school. So I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse since 2007. My nursing career, I went to nursing school my goal was to always be a psych nurse. I have a bachelor's in psychology.
Now, real quick, let me just ask you, hover there for a second. Did that field call you just out of nowhere, or was it from, if you don't, do whatever you want to do, however deep you want to get, but why the crisis line? Why does that kind of stuff call to you? Was it just genuinely, or did experience make you lean into that?
I think it's a great question. It's so funny. For my current job, and this is going to be a very tangential interview. I can see we're going to jump all over the place.
I'm
It'll
sorry.
be fun. No, it's perfect. I love it.
That's the way we operate, but we will still
I like it.
inform.
I'm
I like
hovering.
it.
Yeah, keep
I really
where you're
like
at,
it.
and we'll continue. I just want to.
One of the questions we ask our nurse leaders all the time in a very specific program that I work in is, did you choose nursing or did nursing choose you?
That's
so
a great
it's
question.
that question. Absolutely. And I think it's a little bit of both. When you think about your calling or what you do or what gives you energy or what fills your cup. For me personally, I enjoy people.
Right.
And whether or not you're super well and doing well and you're great, or whether or not you're like sleeping on the concrete outside, like you have a story, you have something to give. I enjoy people. And I think that's kind of what's always been my driver to work in the environment that I work in, to be in social service environments and healthcare environments.
Right.
And that's kind of been my thing. Like, I am a people person. I enjoy the oddities and the stories and quite frankly, just the diversity of thought with folks. So I think that's really what got me in. And to be perfectly honest with you, just to have a little bit of candor, I went to like 5 different colleges, I think. And when I went to my first college, when I very first graduated and went to college, I did 1 semester at a school locally in Baltimore that's no longer there, or the same name. And I had 4 classes, and the only class I did really well in was psychology. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll do something with this.
Right.
And then went to school, got a bachelor's in psychology, and realized in order to do things that I wanted to do, I had to do like another 8 years of school. And I was like, well, that's dumb. I don't want to do that. So what can I do to still be able to work in this environment and make a difference, but not have to go to like medical school, quite
For
frankly.
a decade, right.
Correct. So ended up in nursing school. So that was kind of the path that led me there. And it made sense. And it worked well for me the last 17. I know I don't look like I could be a nurse for 17
No,
years.
man, you've been rocking though. But continue down the run.
Yeah.
I just wanted to lock down as to
yeah,
why
and
psychology.
Like what is that
behavioral-
connection?
And I met you while you were in nursing school.
That is correct.
I met you right after my grandfather.
Yeah,
Like that,
absolutely.
Right then and there.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Like,
I heard about
That month,
I heard about you.
I was in El
actually.
Mary's. And
Wow.
Amanda had worked there, and I went there that night.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's a little bit about my history, and that's how I ended up in nursing. And of course, I continued to go back to school, and I actually never even worked in psych nursing for the first 7 years of my career. I did medical. I worked med surg. So kudos and mad props to all of the med-surg nurses out there. Your job is so hard. You get no street cred. So,
It's
you know,
gotta be.
med-surg nurses.
It's a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah, you're a badass if you're a med-surg nurse. So,
Real, like
yeah.
a quick rundown for the layman. What like, give me a little rundown of what that job looks like.
Yeah, I mean, you are literally on a unit that probably doesn't really have a specialty, but if it does, you still get everybody else too. So you might be, for example, I worked on a women's health med-surg unit. So we had like your typical run-of-the-mill surgical patients, like hysterectomies.
Okay.
But then we also had like sort of stable renal failure, you know?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, or maybe not medically stable psych patient, or
So it's like the Wild West.
it's the
like-
Wild West.
Right.
It's a perfect way, and the ratios are high, help is slim, and there's a
Right,
lot
because
going
no
on.
no one in their right mind will stay there for
Right.
any length of
Yeah,
time.
and she
if-
worked
as a
nights,
job,
too.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I'm still friends with people from that
Yeah.
job because you form a bond.
Yeah, right. It's war. It's
Right.
warfare
Yeah.
in a respectful way to the veterans. It's
Yeah.
war.
Absolutely.
It's a type of warfare.
Yeah.
And let me ask you: do they get paid worth of shit? I mean, do they get paid?
You know, across the board, nurses pretty much make the same amount of money. When you start getting into differences of pay, it's not necessarily about specialty, but more about your license.
I gotcha.
So, as an LPN versus an RN versus a APP, you know, they're all different levels of licensure, different levels of responsibility, and the more letters you have, the more money you make. Basically,
Right.
is kind of how it works.
During her time on the med-surg unit, that is the time you won the Daisy Award. I'll point that out for her. That the Daisy Award, she was the first recipient in Maryland of that award. What was that award about?
It is for excellence in nursing. Yeah.
The Daisy,
Yeah.
nice.
Daisy
well, that's
Award.
awesome. I mean, that's
Yes.
good shit. And
Yes.
for the record, over the years, on the text thread, it's always where David's going. Amanda just graduated. Amanda just did another great thing. Amanda's whipping ass. Amanda's doing this. Amanda's done that. And we're all like, nice, way to go, Amanda. So like, you're rocking.
She's badass.
Yeah, like, you know, your credentials and stuff. You're rocking.
Yeah, I've had a lot of great opportunities, and I've worked with a lot of really amazing people
Right.
that have afforded me the ability to sit with a patient and hold their hand when they're getting their blood drawn.
Right.
So that's all I did for the
Right.
Daisy Award, and I remember it. But it was a young woman who had breast cancer, and she was very young, and she was doing very well, but she had elected to have a reconstruction surgery, and she was terrified of getting blood drawn. Now, this is a woman that was diagnosed at a very young age with cancer, had, you know, removal of body parts
Right.
that can really just impact you from a, you know, mental perspective.
Sure.
And after all of that, her biggest fear was blood draw.
Sure. That's wild. Yeah.
Right.
It's wild to think
Yeah.
about. And I remember just being able to and at the time you don't think anything of it. I'm like, oh, all right, I'm just going to go in there and hang out with my patient and hold her hand because she's terrified.
You're
and
right,
It
she's-
sucks, you know? And you don't think anything of it. You just move on with your day. And then all of a sudden you're like getting called into some meeting and you think you're getting fired.
Right.
Right.
Because
It
they're
made
going to
that
surprise
girl's-
you.
yeah,
Like,
it
No,
made
I
that
mean, you were
lady's
doing your
day.
job. It was a big deal to you, but you weren't really thinking about it that way. You were just doing it, and then you moved on to the next patient or the next thing you had to do. But to
Right.
that patient, it was everything.
Yeah, right.
and
right.
it matters.
And
It
that's
matters.
why the presentation of those kinds of awards are important.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you know, it's not you patting yourself on the back; it's the constituent or the patient itself genuinely being moved.
Yeah, and they've
by
given
you.
that award gets given out every year. There's
It gets a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
actually now.
That's good.
Quarterly, monthly, yearly. It depends on the organization, but it is a national thing.
Yep.
That's good
And
stuff.
people handle it differently. But the most amazing thing, and you can look up the Daisy Foundation. I'm Amanda Gorsuch, by the way. I'm not Amanda Davis. So
Oh.
if you're looking
Damn.
at me
If you're looking for
to
a name.
fact check
It's not a
this,
hyphen.
if you think we're lying,
Oh shit! That's good
Yeah.
call. Yeah,
Right.
I'm gonna be like, this lady's full of shit.
if you're gonna fact check me,
Yeah.
No, it's
fucking
there.
right? Exactly.
I have the award.
Yeah, but it's interesting because when you look on there and you read these stories, you know, most nurses will say, "I was just doing my job."
Sure.
And it's an amazing
And
opportunity.
that's a
Right.
good nurse. You
Right.
know, like that should be
Yeah.
in the, you know, everybody's hope of a nurse.
Right.
that's what you want, which is why you ask the question you do to the interviewees about like, what are, were you
chosen or did it find you? Absolutely.
Right.
And like I said, a little bit of both. I failed every class in college except for psych. So I was like, I guess I'll do that. But then psych sounded really hard and expensive. And not that nursing was not hard. Nursing school is horrific.
Sure.
But it was quicker, So, and back then you could get an AA degree and be ready to, you still can, but back then the AA degree as entry into practice was more than accepted.
Right.
It wasn't even questioned. Now you get an AA degree, but there is an expectation that you continue on to get your bachelor's, which is what I did. And as I continued to go to school, things were progressing in our life. I ended up deciding to leave the med-surg arena, did some IV therapy in between, but it just wasn't the right job for me. Quite frankly, I get pretty grossed out. So, interesting and important because I get pretty grossed out and then decide to go work in an emergency department.
That's what I was going to say.
It's thought nice you were to know, though, that she could give me an IV on the fly if need be.
Oh,
right.
Like I can find a vein anywhere.
Sure.
It's my superpower still. But the funny thing is I did go to work in an ER and quickly learned that sick people were scary to me. Like if you were coming in and you were having a priority 1 or a medical emergency, that required immediate attention, that was really scary to me.
Right.
But like combative guy yelling at people and demanding things, like no problem. Like, come sit with me, sir. Let's talk about it.
Right.
So I quickly realized that I should probably just transition into the behavioral health space. And that's what I did. So, I'd had some previous experience working in psych, but never as a nurse.
So when was that when you made that transition?
2014, I believe. Right. So 10 years ago.
Yeah, so you've been in the trenches for a decade.
Yeah. And prior to that, though, I did work in a behavioral health environment, just not as a nurse. So I worked as, support staff and crisis counselor.
Right. You were in that world.
Yeah. Yeah. So I always kind of knew I wanted to get back into that space. And that's what happened. And I got back into psych and I had the best job ever. I worked night shift in a psych ER and it made the Wild West look like
in a psych ER.
Yeah, nothing.
That name alone sounds ballsy.
Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah.
It
Psych
was
ER.
An amazing just experience with amazing people, and you never knew what was going to happen.
Right.
And you really started to recognize that these people, these patients that were coming in for help, they're in circumstance.
Right.
No one's asking to live this way. No one wants to be, on the street or having difficulties with their home or their job or all the other millions of scenarios that can take place. And you really learn that they're just people and they're in circumstances. And yeah, the choices we make take us to where we are. Absolutely. But sometimes not everybody has the best guidance.
Absolutely. And also to keep it on the level of Sanity Lounge vibes, the rhythms, if you've never been shown, what rhythms to pay attention to, what not to, if you've never had the inspiration to make good decisions, it's like it's very easy to throw stones with this mental health shit.
Oh, absolutely.
But every second you are a different being. As time goes on. And so it's like you just can't judge everybody. People make bummed choices, but it doesn't mean they're bums.
Right. Oh, I love that.
Well, 100%.
Yeah, it's true. And, I think that's such an important part because that's part of why I'm here today.
Right.
It's full circle, but really about why I'm here is to talk about stigma and talk about the way we view people and really think about one of the things we talk about in psych all the time is that it's not about, what happened. It's not about what's wrong with you. It's about what happened to you because we are, victims of circumstance. We are products of stress response, and we're learning more and more and more about that, more than we've ever known. And not just hokey,
it's not
wellness
pseudoscience.
Right. It's not
legit.
I love that. Yeah, this is legit. This is scientific, research that's occurring that is just demonstrating that, we can be better. We can heal. There is help, and we should allow people to not be okay.
Right. Right.
You have to be okay with not being okay sometimes.
Right.
And that will break the stigma and being able to have open conversations about these types of issues.
Yeah.
On the heavy subjects like drugs, same vibe. It's like, that's getting better. It seems people are having more open conversations because one day, 5 years, 10 years ago, everyone woke up and knows someone who's got a problem with drugs.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh, it's not just the morons.
Right.
It's me and my wife and my what, and so once that sinks in, you can then have more open conversations because everybody realizes you're chewing the same dirt.
Right.
It's still not perfect. It's better than it was. And suicide, I feel like, isn't as accessible yet, because as what you're saying.
And it's the fear of having a conversation too. And
Sure.
Based on the repercussions of the conversations and
Right.
And
being judged.
And also, I think your instinct as a human, you tell me, I don't know, I might be I am spitballing, but I think instinctually you veer from those topics. Like if you see something, if there's an issue on suicide, most people turn the page, in my head. There might not be any statistics to support that, but I feel like most people veer away.
What do you mean? Like ignore it?
Yeah, like if I'm reading, or if I look at our thread and I look at the episodes, there's going to be a percentage of our audience that just will go past because if they see the word suicide, they're like, well, I don't want to touch that.
Sure,
I don't want to look into that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But we have to, try to access even those people because they will be affected,
Well, it's a touchy subject.
It
and
is.
I teach I give a talk about peer support. And one of the things that always comes up when I talk about peer support is people say to me, well, what happens if someone isn't okay?
Mm-hmm.
What happens if I ask someone, are you okay? And they say that they're not. What do I do?
That's a good question.
And that is a barrier for folks. So we have a barrier of people asking for help because they don't want to be stigmatized and they don't want to be looked at as weak and not able to handle it, or that maybe they made a mistake and screwed up and they're just a loser, right? That's what all the things that we tell ourselves. Sure. And then we have another side of folks that are afraid to ask because what if you say you aren't okay?
That's what I was going to say. I feel like people will ask the question hesitantly, hoping that they say, I'm fine, so they can just move on.
Right.
Even if they know they're not fine.
Right.
Right.
That's the truth. Is it takes someone with chutzpah, with real. It takes a real
you
friend
just want
to
put it
ask
out
that
there,
question and mean it.
I gotta ask if you're fine. I know you're not, but hopefully you say you're fine, so we can move on and do whatever else we were going to do.
Right.
Which is a common.
Right.
It's a
That's a
human
common
thing.
I mean,
I think also we shy away from things that make us unnervous or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We don't want to think about it. Or maybe I don't know anybody that has not been impacted by suicide. I don't. Whether they know somebody specifically or they were, a 6 degrees even. But every single person I know has been impacted by this. So
It's
sometimes
an
you
insidious.
don't want to talk about it.
Right.
You don't want to think about it. It's taboo, and unfortunately, if we don't talk about it, it gives it energy. It breeds because people feel even more alone.
So a loved one of mine asked me, they knew I was coming here today, and they were like, yeah, but he was acting like, he was like, the problem with suicide is if you try to talk to someone about it, all of a sudden you're 86, you're going to get thrown in whatever, and there's all this shit. So why would anyone lean into talking to someone about it? Because they always say, don't joke about it. If anybody mentions it, don't think they're kidding. And this and that. And it's making people who may want to say, hey man, I'm struggling a little bit, but they don't want to be like 5150'd, and they don't want their job to think they're crazy,
Right.
So it's like this weird balancing act,
Right.
And so what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So for anybody that doesn't understand what any of that was,
You're right. You're right. Well, yeah, please. You speak.
I was trying to follow
You
along,
speak
but
fluent
I get it.
Lepese.
Yeah.
Do you you understand
yeah,
what
I
I'm
totally
saying? Yeah, you
understand
speak
what you're saying, and I
Lepese
think
and
it's a
explain
really
it to the public.
extremely valid thing to bring up.
No,
So,
I mean, I do understand what you're saying.
right, when we talk about safety, when we talk about confidentiality, when we talk about confiding in folks, for example, a lot of what I do with my job is confidential. I can't talk about it.
Right.
And no, I don't have, level 5 FBI clearance. I don't know if that's
no
a thing.
Raymond Reddington.
I'm not Raymond Reddington.
Right. Damn.
But there are confidential conversations that I have all the time, every day for my work. And when it comes to a point of safety, those conversations aren't so confidential, because if people are admitting that they might want to harm themselves or harm somebody else, it is my due diligence to ensure that the proper channels are taken to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Sure.
And that is pretty much across the board. So what does that mean, though? What is the due diligence? And that becomes a really hot topic with folks, which also might even deter people from getting help, to your point.
Right.
Because, yes, there is legal methods that can be taken to take people against their will and hold them against their will. A lot of the movie Hollywood vision of that is very different.
Oh, I know.
Right. There isn't like a certain time frame, it's not like, oh, they can hold you for this amount of time. Now, yes, there's lots of timing and lots of legal things, and that could be a conversation for a whole nother time also. We'll save that till May when it's Mental Health Awareness Month. But yes, you can be taken against your will and put into a hospital and be forced to take treatment. Absolutely. The reality of it is that that's not as easy. It's easier said than done.
Right.
There's lots of legal things that have to happen. There's lots of things that have to be proven or demonstrated even. And there's other ways to deal with it. So if someone is feeling as if they may want to harm themselves, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be, carted off and, put in a rubber room somewhere. There are things that can happen to be able to get people treatment, but that is a fear. And it is one of those things that does prevent people from sometimes reaching out for help because
it's a weird double-edged sword.
I would say more often than not.
Probably, yeah, because it's a weird double-edged sword. But when he asked that, I was like, "That's a good question."
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I was going to talk about this, but what the hell? Why not now? We'll just get all into it. One of the things I wanted to bring up today is remind people, or make sure that people know, if they don't know, is about the national number that can be called for suicide or for any mental health issues. So 988. 2 summers ago, I believe that was official. There was a suicide hotline that existed. It was like a 1-800 number. It existed for a really long time, like back from the early 2000s up until recently.
Wow. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So there was a suicide hotline. And then just recently, in the last couple of years, we've converted to the 988 number. So just like any of your other, emergency numbers or public numbers, 988 is a number that can be called 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it will connect the caller to a person, not a bot, not a recording, and they are connected with licensed clinical professionals that can offer assistance in those times of need.
Right. That's good stuff.
Interesting thing is there seems to be some concern from people calling that number because they don't want the police sent to their house.
Okay, so that's right to our point what we were talking about.
And that's a really serious fear for people. And I understand that on many, many, many different levels. And, when you think about that, I will say that some statistics say that about 2% of all the calls have ever resulted in a crisis mobile team being deployed.
Sure.
So depending on where people live and the resources in their cities, they do have crisis mobile teams, and they will send these teams out. And typically that does include police officers. So people are a little bit hesitant of that, which I can understand.
Sure.
You know, but I will say that a very, very tiny percent of those calls result in police activity. And quite frankly, when we think about people needing help and, you know, being able to serve them, a lot of times the question is, well, who else is there with you? Is anybody else home? Who can you call? Is there a neighbor? Like, who can be with you right now? And then you can confirm that that person arrived. Or if I was at home and I call and he's there, then he can, you know, confirm that he is there and say, yes, we'll, you know, take her somewhere, etc. So it doesn't result in, you know, this big ambush of your house.
Right.
But I get the fear. I do.
I have the utmost respect for anybody who can talk somebody on the phone like that on the fly when you're just sitting there waiting. When you're taking that call, you're knowing you have to like step up. I mean, like when I had to call the 911 operator with Lincoln when he had the seizure, I mean, she kept me
Calm.
from literally losing it.
Right, yeah.
Like
A
she
good
kept me focused even though I was freaking and stressing out.
Funny thing about that story is, we'll just, of course, again, we'll just go.
Yeah, this is what we do.
This is what we
baby.
do
This is
here at the Sanity
Lounge. Yeah,
Lounge.
this is going to help you by the end of this.
This is what we
right.
do. The funny thing about that story is that I was working in the ER.
Yep.
And
was home
our
with the boys.
20-month-old at the time had a febrile seizure. And but at the time we didn't know that was what was going on, and he was home by himself. It's nighttime because I'm at work.
Old Dr. David.
That's
Dude,
correct.
just giving him his normal bath,
getting a
man.
bath, yeah.
Giving him his normal
had
bath,
to
and
be
like we
terrifying.
had our bathroom like I took the door off, so like there was the shower, the toilet, and the sink, but there used to be a door between them. There was no door, so he was in the bath, standing there, or maybe he was sitting down. I think he was sitting down, and I just walked over to the sink. He was crying because he had a temperature.
He
also
didn't feel good, and he was
So-
crying.
in the time that I just walked over to the sink, he stopped crying, and when I walked back, he was having a seizure, and I freaked out. I mean,
Yeah.
Garrett was home. Garrett was a little over 2.
Yeah, that should
So I
Garrett
called-
was
yeah.
like 3.5.
3.5.
Garrett
I
was
called
3.5.
911, and I mean, and they told me everything to do. Pick him up. Like I can't. I mean, it happened so fast, but it
Yeah.
seemed like an eternity.
Yep.
The interesting part of that story
Horrifying.
is
It was
that
it was the worst.
I'm sure.
I was
the
working,
best and worst.
Right, I'm sure.
but I was working in the ER. So in the emergency department, for anyone that doesn't know or you've never worked in the emergency department, there's a box, and what the box is it's a phone, and the box will ring because EMS is calling in to alert the ER team that they have, a case on board.
Some serious coming in.
Exactly.
or something.
Something's coming.
I
We're
called.
coming in hot.
I called her after 911. I mean, the medics came. I finally called her at work. Didn't get her, and they were like, "She's busy."
Right,
I'm
she's
like,
in the ER.
I'm like, please go get her.
Right.
Lincoln is on his way.
Right.
And they were like, got it.
right.
But then the box rang. And it
You
was
heard in real time?
Yeah,
The
it
ringing.
was the
Wow.
ringing, and I knew they were calling about my kid
Right.
because they have to call in any kid.
Sure.
So right, because like you said, we're coming in hot,
Right.
So you have to be prepared. So I remember at the time our charge nurse like answering to answer
Yeah,
the
she was like,
box.
I can't take that call.
I was like, I can't answer
They're
that
like,
call.
what do
It's
you-
my kid.
It's my kid.
Yeah,
right.
they're calling about my 20-month-old,
Yeah.
and
God, that had to be horrible.
it was wild.
It was a wild
Yeah.
night. Wild
Yeah.
night.
It was wild.
night.
Yeah, and bringing your baby into the ER. He's never had a seizure since.
No, he hasn't.
Ever.
But there was I
Yeah.
found out it was a common thing, and it could happen up until they were 5,
Something
I think.
like
but,
that.
Let me tell you
Yeah.
something.
But it was the reason the seizure was caused by his spike because he was fine, and then his temperature spiked up to 104 like that, and it caused a seizure.
We're not going to go off onto the seizure episode, but let me just tell you right quick. My boss, 5 weeks ago, his child, who is 6 years old, all of a sudden had a seizure,
Oh, my goodness.
turned blue, and
Scary.
he had to give her CPR.
CPR.
They took her to Hopkins. They did all these tests. They trying to figure it out. Couldn't find anything, and basically said that these things sometimes
can
these
happen.
kids have
It may
seizures,
never happen again.
and she's
right?
been fine.
Yeah.
So it almost heartens me to hear that it did happen to you guys, and
it was wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
because it was a rough night for my boss. And so it's good stuff.
But that's working in the ER. Like, you literally never know what's going to
God.
happen. I mean, you never know.
Yeah, what the hell's wrong with you people? I mean, that's the real.
Well, that's the real question,
Right.
which is actually why my current job exists.
Interesting.
Right, because I worked in the psych environment for, I guess, a good 8 years through the pandemic.
Boy, I bet you there was
Leader-
nothing to do then.
Yeah. I mean, she was nurse, educator, leader.
Sure.
She's been through all of it in behavioral health.
Yeah, so I was director of behavioral health through the pandemic, and it was a different time. I will say that it was a different time, and one of the things that we really learned during those moments in the healthcare environment is that. Gosh, we're so horrible at taking care of ourselves.
Right, self-care.
We're horrible at it. And I think we always knew that. We always knew that burnout. I mean, we've been talking about burnout in nursing since the 70s. I mean, that's documented. We've been talking about staffing since the early 80s, probably even into the 70s. So we've always had the same problems in nursing. So the reality of it is that culture doesn't seem to really, I don't even know if that would be considered a culture, but those concerns in healthcare with the nursing profession seems to be pretty stagnant there, right? We've always been talking about burnout. We've always been talking about staffing. So the pandemic gave us an opportunity to say, okay, now we're really looking at these things.
Right.
How can we just better take care of our staff? What do we do to enhance your well-being? And that is really what led me here today, because I went from being in the behavioral health space to then moving into a position in what we call well-being.
Right.
And that has really given me a lot of opportunity in the last, 2.5 years already, I feel like, to explore some things that really interest me. And one of the things that we do in my current world is Suicide Awareness Month. And we have a prevention campaign, if you will.
Right.
So it's been one of the things that I've been involved with the last 2 years. And that will be coming up this month, of course, in September. So being able to talk to people about suicide.
Who are you talking to? Like, are you talking to nurses or people?
Pretty much anybody in a healthcare system.
Okay,
Anybody that's going to be willing to talk to us, walk by, take a flyer, listen to anything we have to say.
Right.
And really being able to work on that team, I guess we're sort of a little committee, if you will, has really kind of spiked my interest in this topic, and really has recognized that how many people don't know that 988 exists.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know it until you said it to me. I didn't know.
Yesterday I sent you guys a picture,
right?
Like that light post behind my work. I've never noticed that there.
Right,
that there's a 988 sign back there.
Yeah.
I mean, how long's it been there? That's the question. Is it,
I don't know. I mean, I really don't.
The last 2 years.
Maybe I just haven't. It just wasn't on my brain, so I never looked up at the sign.
Yeah, y'all will start seeing it everywhere now. You'll see it on people's stickers.
I have weird
on
theories
cars.
about why the sign's back there anyway, but I don't really need to go into it.
Right.
One thing I wanted to ask you, one thing I wanted to say, back to the 988 thing about how the fear of people calling. For those listening or watching this, it's not the movies. Like, they're bent, like the nurses, the 988, it's not, the government setting you up. It's people who care and who want to help and don't want that to go that way.
Right.
The last thing they want is to take it that way. It's
and
like
to make the situation more stressful.
Sure, it's not, and so you're thinking too much, or you're in your own head. You've got to understand that they're there to help. It's not 1984. They're not going to, it's good stuff. It's not bad stuff. You know what I mean?
And I am sensitive to the topics of social distress, and or social arrest, or
Well, and paranoia. Don't get me wrong. Sure, paranoia.
right.
I'm not. It's not that there's nothing there, but when you're talking about suicide and mental health and stuff, this kind of thing, the people that are answering the phone, their incentive, their soul is probably more like yours, like
correct.
to help.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And the goal is to assist somebody.
That's what I'm saying. Like, who the hell would do it?
Right.
Like, they're not going to do it unless they have stake in the game,
or just genuinely care.
That's what I mean.
People.
Sure, that's what I mean by stake in the game. Like a soul about the calls, they might have chewed the same dirt or whatever.
Yeah.
They don't want to sick the cops on you.
No.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, so keep
no,
that in
I
mind.
agree with that, absolutely. And, one of the things I think is important to mention is that, I'm a nurse. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychologist. I am a nurse. Yes, I have an affinity for the mental health side of things, and I've always been attracted to psych. But the folks that are answering those calls, if you will, are licensed professionals. Like, they genuinely care about you and your well-being. I mean, trust me, they're not doing it for the money, and they're certainly not doing it for the glory of these jobs.
Right. What's the glory?
It's extremely emotionally taxing. When I worked, and again, this was 25 years ago, when I worked at the crisis hotline down in Tampa, our phones would ring from the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. So at the time, and I don't know what the current statistics are, but at the time, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge was one of the leading bridges that people would use to, jump. And it was such a public concern that the county had put crisis phones up there. That's more and more common nowadays, and you will see that around. But at the time, it was kind of a new thing. Like, well, wow, we're going to put some phones up on this bridge, and just hopefully someone will call if they go up there. So it was a really new sort of idea in a sense.
And you answered those phones?
Those phones rang into the office I worked in. Yes. Yep, they sure did. Not often, or people would be driving across the bridge and have a flat tire or something. So they pick up the phone,
Right.
But they have been called. I mean, it is impactful. People make deals in their head and say, well, I'm going to call this number, and if they answer,
I got one last shot.
Right, one last shot.
If somebody answers, I won't. If they do, I will.
Then exactly. Right. And so there is, statistically speaking, evidence to say that these interventions are valuable and they're worth it. And it doesn't matter if those phones have been up there for 25 years and one person has been saved.
Yeah.
At least one person got saved.
Right. Absolutely.
Because that's what matters. If one person listens to this episode and is able to call 988 for themselves, or recognize in their friend or their coworker or their neighbor that they don't seem their normal self, or that they're concerned, and one person is impacted, that's what matters.
It's
to me.
huge.
Yeah.
It's fucking huge.
That's all we want.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
That's
all
all
you
we
need.
can ask for.
Right.
Yeah. It's
Right.
so big.
Absolutely.
And, it does... Yeah, it definitely, it matters.
Absolutely. And that's the goal. The goal is to be able to talk about these things. It's to not, I don't like when we say things like normalize. Like, I don't want to normalize talking about suicide.
Sure,
you know, I mean, that's a
Right.
horrible thing to think about, right? But normalizing it is in the fact that it shouldn't be so taboo. We should be able to talk about it. We should be able to check on each other and know that there is help, and know that if you are feeling hopeless, worthless, filled with guilt or remorse or grief, that there is help out there.
Right. Yes.
There's help out there for everyone. And people will say, well, I don't have health insurance. It doesn't matter. You
It's
can
a
get
different
help.
field. Yeah, it's
You
a
can get
different
help.
field. Like,
Right.
you can figure,
Right. Right.
I mean, hold on, because I just lost my thought. I had something with this. out of this.
But talking about people don't have health insurance,
Right.
they can still get help.
Right.
There are still resources for you. There are so many resources right here in Baltimore for people to be able to get assistance with mental health.
Right.
Yes, diagnoses such as depression make you much more vulnerable to suicide.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
We
it's all-
know that. But
You
Yeah.
got it.
Listen, this
Yeah.
is what I was going to say to you. So, I'm really on this whole like rhythm kick, and I have the history of trying to get sober and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and so I've been thinking a lot about this suicide topic because I've had a lot of that around me and in my family and stuff like that, and I feel like, is there a part of it in this literature, or is there anybody that, like, do you guys kind of view it at all in the same way as drug impulse? Like, in other words, a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine who ended up killing himself one time, and I didn't know he was suicidal at all. I knew him for years. I didn't know he was suicidal. And one time he was at my house every day for years, for 10 hours a day. One day he didn't show up and I couldn't get a hold of him for 3 days. And then after 3 days, he came back and he said to me that day, and he was happy. He was always happy. Came back that day and he said to me, I'm sorry, I disappeared, but sometimes I get like that. And when I get like that, I can't be reached. Like, nothing can reach me. And I'm like, well, what do I do? And he's like, I don't know, but it's like, something's got to knock me out of it. And it's not you, it's something inside. And so it made me start thinking of it as almost like, it's like, if you can survive, like, because in other words, he survived that 3-day chunk in a different world. If he would have went with his original impulse, that might have been it that day. Mm-hmm. But he could beat back that impulse. And so I'm wondering, is it ever akin to the same kind of like rhythms that addiction? I don't know how to articulate. Like, it's like, I feel like, if you can just survive these impulses, if you're trying to kick drinking and you're going and you're holding the shot and you don't do it, you don't do that impulse. It's hard, but it's like the same thing. It's like if you're there and you have a suicidal thought, it's like holding the shot in your hand. And if you can treat it like a impulse control, not that that's easy.
No, I get what you're saying.
You understand what I'm saying?
I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah,
but
and
I would say, sure, you could resist that impulse, but it's coming back.
Well, my point is that maybe you
because
could try to train to pay attention to impulse control.
Sure, that would be like a preventative measure.
It's so fucking hard.
Something.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, and that, I mean, like, what I was gonna say is just the vicious circle, like what you were talking about not just the person who's depressed or thinking, or it's the friends or whoever they reach out to that isn't a professional because they're afraid of reaching out or calling 988 or talking to someone or going to the doctor or calling the police. It's they reach out to their friend maybe, and then that person doesn't know what to do. Like, they don't know how to help them. Be their friend, sure, that's easy to say, but then they don't know. Can I call the police? Like, they're afraid. That,
are they going to betray?
What if betray our friendship? Sure. Then make things worse. I mean, it's just a vicious. It's not a vicious circle, but it's a circle. So it's hard. I mean, everyone needs to understand. Not just if you're fine, because somebody might not be, and they might all of a sudden reach out to you.
Statistically, they aren't.
Right, and they might just all of a sudden, somebody your best friend, it might just all of a sudden reach out to you, and all of a sudden your whole world's changed because of what they just shared with you.
Right.
And how are you going to handle that and step up to the plate and help them
and be right? I mean, it's hard.
So I'm
not saying that I could even do it, but I'd like to think that I can.
Sure.
There's a lot to unpack here.
All right, nice. Let's table this. Let's table this and let's go back and unpack this.
So I'm very interested in what you were talking about because this is something I talk about. I know, right?
Good.
I talk about. Imagine that.
Go ahead.
I talk about this a lot, and the brain is an amazing organ, and there's a lot going on up there. But some things are very fundamental. And when you think about stimulus and response,
Right.
so something happens to us and our brain takes it in and we perceive it as either good and we're good, or it's a threat.
Right.
I mean, basically that's what's happening. And there is then a response. Well, you have a microsecond of time in between stimulus and response. And that is when you have time to make a choice. And that can go from anything.
Right.
Whether you're going to drink
Right.
when you're trying not
Right.
to, whether you're going to harm yourself
Right.
when you know.
So it is similar. Damn, I was
Right. There is a very micro moment.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing about the brain is, though, is that in our, what we like to refer to as our rational brain or our chill brain or our parasympathetic nervous system, that side of our brain is much more reasonable, but it's slower. Now, when we talk slower, we're talking like microseconds. Our sympathetic nervous system is the other side of our brain, and that actually responds quicker because it's responsible for determining whether or not we're in danger. So our sympathetic nervous system is not so sympathetic. I like to remind myself of which one does what for that reason. But our sympathetic nervous system is the one that is responsible for witnessing whether or not, or believing that whether or not we are in danger. And then that will set off a whole slew of events of the fight, flight, or freeze response. And then we're in like complete stress response. And that's how now we're going to react to something. So it's really important to think about the stimulus, the response, and that tiny little second in between. And the good news is that we've learned in recent years is that we can get really good at controlling that. But it's the impulses that get us into trouble. And that time when, you know, maybe our brains are taking in some information and we're like believing that it is going to be good for us, or that we are not in danger or not in some type of stress response. And so we are responding to whatever is happening in our environment, which is fine, but that response isn't always good for us. Right. So it's a really interesting concept, and it is something that we speak about a lot, even in the well-being space, because it gives us the opportunity to believe that we do have a choice. We can start to recognize those itty bitty, seconds, milliseconds in between something that happens to us and how we respond to it and how we react to it. And then what our next steps are, because we do technically have a choice. Now, when you're thinking about things like, you know, mental illness and depression and suicide and substance misuse disorders, you know, those things get really murky because we're not making great decisions. We're constantly functioning in a stress response. And when we're functioning in a stress response,
it's anybody's game at that moment.
We're not rational beings. We're in survival mode, you know, and it becomes a very different animal at that point. So, you know, there is something to say about that impulse that happens. But, you know, there is no one reason why people choose to die by suicide. There is no one cause. There is no one solution, if you will. It really is very different. The stories are different. And that's, I think, what makes it so difficult, because sometimes you don't know.
Right. Yeah. It's a hauntingly fascinating, upsetting, you know, personal subject that is hard to deal with. And that's why, like, we're just leaning into this because nobody does talk about it, and everybody will get affected by it. Let me just real quick, while I'm doing the thing, you know, we talk about films a lot on this show. And although, you know, this is a documentary, and to me, I saw this came out in 2006. Okay. Now, it's called The Bridge. Okay. It's very controversial. Okay. Now, you know, and I have ran the gamut of opinion as to whether or not, you know, this was a productive endeavor. Okay. But I land on I think it was.
Okay.
And I think that the guy who made this has skin in the game. He had personal people he knows, kill himself. And for those at home, the film is a documentary. And for one full year, this filmmaker set up 4 cameras at the 4 corners of the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge.
Yep.
And at the time, the Golden Gate Bridge was the most suicided bridge in the nation at the time. It probably varies or whatever.
Right.
So he, for 1 year, set up 4 cameras, and for 24 hours a day, he had a crew that would monitor these cameras. Now, they were in touch with the bridge guards, and if they saw action, they tried to intervene.
Sure, they didn't just leave them recorded.
Right, it wasn't a morbid thing.
Yeah,
But in the
wild.
course of 12 months, 13 people jumped off the bridge. One of them was the gentleman that you've met. Okay, we'll talk about him in a second. 13 people in 12 months killed themselves. And then what the filmmaker did was, again, they took it very, they were not trying to exploit these people.
Found the families
and
interviewed
and
the
what he
families.
did was he tried to figure out what led these people to this particular thing, and the interest, where it becomes psychologically interesting is out of the 13 people, 10 of them live way far out of California, and all had seen the bridge as a child, and it affected them. Their families, when they were interviewing them, were like, I remember when he was 8 and he saw the Golden Gate Bridge for the first time, and he couldn't believe it. He always wanted to go back. He just went, and that's where he chose. It's a fascinating, but he leans into it. He's talking about it. He's not shying away from it. It is a fascinating look, and he treats it with respect.
Sure.
The families are very appreciative of it. And the one guy you met, I guess, there's a gentleman who talk about impulse control. One guy in this jumps and lives. And they interview him. And he's like, the second I let go, I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And he was already going, and, and he got lucky, but if you just hold on, 1 minute, watch the clock, get through 60 seconds and be like, okay, that's a minute, get through it. If you can get past that impulse, there is a brighter day. It's going to take work, and it's not easy.
I would say it's productive. That documentary is productive, it's just another way to spread awareness and just hear stories. And try and understand something.
Exactly. But this did not get a lot of, because it's, again, people shied away from it. Every person I recommended it to is like, I'm not watching that. I'm like, yeah, but it's not like you don't. It's not gross. It's a testament to the human condition, the psychology of it, and
I think sometimes it's easier to watch something like Deadpool, where people are just getting murdered every 5 seconds, than to actually have to be in the depths of someone's mind.
You're right.
That's a scary place.
Right.
Because really, what are we all thinking? What is really going on? You feel like you never really know.
Right.
And I think when it comes to, I've never seen this movie. And
right. I know.
It is funny. That's an interesting fact about me, is that although professionally I am very attracted to some doom and gloom,
mayhem,
quite frankly.
right.
I really am. I have been known to attend talks on mass shootings and all types of crisis type events,
right.
And when it comes to my personal life, I'm watching Love is Blind, because
right.
that doesn't stress me out.
Yeah,
I can handle it professionally, and I'm very interested professionally to help folks or to understand things like school shootings or mass shootings and learning about what happens and just the background of these things,
right.
and what's going on in people's brains and why these things happen,
right.
and about the victims and the families and the survivors, and how can we help them? How can we prevent them from not being okay? Or how do we help them heal after events? Right. But then when it comes to us like watching movies or TV or even
Blacklist.
yeah.
You get stressed
Right.
out.
I get so stressed out. I mean, I
We have to.
stopped
We
watching.
always have to after we watch. I mean, even like
I
maybe
can
a
give you
scary
a-
movie, just something that's just intense or stressful or a thriller. We always have to like go to Seinfeld after.
Watch
to
an
get some
episode of
laughs
Seinfeld.
Yeah,
in.
right.
Get our brains back in order.
Sure.
Season 8, episode 8. That's all I
Yeah.
need in my life.
That's the Kenny Rogers roaster. That's for anybody who's wondering. It's Amanda's favorite.
Well, I
episode
mean,
my
of
favorite
Seinfeld.
episode,
That's
right?
par for
But
the
it
course.
helps
Like most
me,
people,
right.
if you're in a field, you don't want to make
And
your
I tell
Well,
them
it's
that all
hard
the
to
time.
not become desensitized to it when you see it every day.
Right.
I mean,
And
it's
I
got to be
am-
a hard thing just to, I guess, continue to care.
Well, and you don't need
it's-
to see the documentary because you've seen it in real life. So, like,
Yeah.
you know, so
Yeah.
it's more for the folks at home.
And
you
I
know,
think the
that
funny
way.
thing is, like you were saying, is like I'm not desensitized at all.
Right.
Right.
No,
Which is
I know that.
Really tough
Right.
because
Because
I
you
wish,
genuinely care.
Right. I wish I could disconnect.
Right.
I very recently just received a
And
random
everything's different.
email from
Every scenario is just
right. It
kinda
is.
different.
It's always
so
different. Right. But
It's
when
not cookie cutter. It's situation.
Right.
and you
ever.
have to trust your gut and you have to be authentic with people because you want them to be authentic with you.
Definitely.
So being able to, speak with folks and be open and just let them talk and not be judgmental and not be biased and
That's important.
It's an art. Yeah, it's a
and
huge
not
art
be
form.
watching the time. I'm probably bad about that, but also good about that, because if I'm doing a coaching call with someone and they're having a bad time, like I let them talk, I'm not like, oh, well, this call's over in 2 minutes. So anything else
Right.
we need to discuss? And I probably should be better about those things, but
Well, even that's a
But not
balance. You've got to
necessarily.
balance that.
Right,
You can't, you
Yeah.
have to keep your head right, but you also don't want to, whore them. It's
Right.
like,
Exactly.
Sometimes you just have to keep listening. I mean, it's,
right.
Right. It's like you
And-
said, you got to step up sometimes.
You bring up a really good point too, and I had written like a little note about this, but I wanted to say this earlier is that, when we think about asking people if they're okay, when we're talking with people, if we're checking in on our folks, sometimes we have to do it more than once, or sometimes we just can't accept someone saying I'm fine because that they're not, and you said that earlier, and challenging people to that and not starting arguments, but being willing to ask someone more than once. One of the things we talk about a lot in the peer support space is I'm checking me. So check me, check 3, check on 3 people. You check yourself, you're okay. That you can handle helping others because sometimes you can't, right?
Yeah, right.
You got to think about yourself.
got to
You gotta
check
put-
on yourself
Right.
first.
You got to check on yourself first,
Right,
put
that's
on
a
your
good-
oxygen mask. We always see those, graphics, and then you can help others around you. And the idea is that, you check me and then check 3, check 3 people around you. But I was recently thinking about that concept and even extending it to say, then 3 times. Like, am I asking you 3 times, how are you? Because it might matter. Because you
right.
might not want to tell me the first or second time, but maybe the 3rd time you will. So I think it's important, and it comes back to well-being. And when we think about mindfulness and being in the moment and what does that mean? And so many of these terms are very, like highlight reel terms right now.
Right, right.
Self-care, mindfulness, meditation, everybody's doing it. Sure. But when we think about well-being and when we think about Suicide Prevention Month and quite frankly, suicide prevention year long is really something to think about.
Right.
Absolutely. When we think about these months and these observance and why we even talk about it, it's giving us the permission to start thinking about it and to start having these hard conversations. And then that also is reminding us that we need to be mindful in these spaces, that if we ask somebody, hey, how are you today? Really mean it and really pay attention to what they're saying. It's like, I'm just like, oh yeah, how you doing today? As I'm scrolling on my phone. And what is that message that's sending to somebody? Really being able to be in tune with somebody, look at them, see how they're feeling, see how they're acting, and asking them how they are. And that's really about being mindful. It's about being in the moment. And that is what is so important. And really paying attention to the people around us, really noticing those maybe slight changes in personality that the regular person wouldn't notice because you're not immersed in this person's life.
Right.
But are you acting different? Are you not sleeping? Are you making plans for the future that don't sound like they're plans for the future?
Sure.
You know,
Do you not
getting
care
your
about something?
affairs in order and right. How are you talking about things? Are people struggling with guilt? Are they struggling with frustration? Are they struggling with loss? Are they feeling hopeless? Are they feeling that there's no solutions for their problems?
Right.
And really being aware of that. And it feels overwhelming. It feels like we all now have the weight on our shoulders. But the reality of it is it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
And I think that's important to mention is that when we think about peer support or when we think about checking on each other or looking out for each other, isn't that just what we're doing anyway?
Right.
Right.
We're humans and we live for social interaction. We live to be connected to each other. So why not look out for each other?
Right. Right. Everybody has, enough time to save someone,
Sure.
if they really think about it, and if they, even, you just have to care just a little bit. And sometimes the olive branch, just answering the phone, or you don't have to
Right.
be Sigmund Freud.
Right.
Like, you just got to listen.
And it's so cliche, but it's like be nice to people because you never know what they're going through.
Right. It's like
Ever.
the walk
Like
a
they
mile
might
in
be
my
cutting
shoes
you
thing.
off, like bumping into you, like ignore. You have no idea.
You know, it's funny. For me personally, when I got into the well-being world 2.5 years ago, it was not long after my dad died. So my dad died in December of 21, not from COVID. I feel like I always have to say that.
For
I
the
don't know
record.
why, but that's important to me for some weird
Yeah.
reason. Died in December of 21, right before chaos of Omicron happened. So thank goodness we were able to be there. But the point of this was that happened in December, and then by May of 2022 is when I transitioned professionally into a well-being role. And it was so interesting because during those moments, I was getting certified as a health and life coach. I was getting certified as a Clarity Catalyst trainer. I was watching podcasts and watching TED Talks and reading about well-being and what all this means, and just really trying to position myself to have a good understanding of that
whole
world,
gamut.
right? Because
Right.
it's something that I've ever really thought about before, and it was interesting because what I started realizing in conversations that him and I started having was exactly this, that yeah, I'm human. I get super mad. I mean, school starts next week. I'm already dreading drop off. Like, gosh, help me. But anyway, but I'm gonna talk myself off the edge and remind myself that guy that's driving up the shoulder on 695 and is going to cut me off, and that's the reason why traffic stinks. Maybe his wife is in labor and he's trying to get to the hospital.
Right.
Maybe his dad's having a heart attack. Maybe his kid's stranded. So I don't know what his story, or he might just be a big jerk.
Right.
But you know what?
Yeah, that could always be the answer.
It's none of my business, quite
Right.
frankly. And me personally being able to look at the world differently and believe that people are doing the best that they can.
Right.
And the reasons that they are doing the things that they're doing right now that are potential for super annoyance from me really doesn't have anything to do with me. Again, it's that stimulus
Right.
and then me choosing how to react to it.
Yeah. Right.
And so the guy or girl driving up the shoulder on Monday morning when I'm dropping the kids off, I'm just going to take a deep breath and in my brain tell myself that they have an emergency that they're trying to get to.
I'll
and
try that
it
too,
helps.
because I don't always.
You don't
make the
do
right
that.
decision.
Yeah, I would say you're an asshole. Let me tell you something.
No. I'm talking about. I'll just block them.
Yeah, he does.
It makes me angry. Shoulder drivers.
Oh, I know.
But again,
But you never know. And I'm just saying
yeah.
from a stance of mental wellness and from a stance of frustration and all the other things that we have to think about in the world right now, me being able to believe that, people are doing the best that they can and not being worked up about whatever their behaviors are. If I walk into a 7-Eleven and the guy in front of me doesn't hold the door,
Right.
and it's just like boom, and I'm like trying to, like, historically, that probably would have made me really frustrated and annoyed. And I would have been like, this guy's a big jerk. Like, oh, he's on his phone. He's not even paying attention to the world around him. Blah, 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 blah. But, you don't know. Maybe he's getting test results from a biopsy he had last week from his physician, and he just found out he's got, like, cancer. You don't know, So me kind of doing some introspection to be able to view the world around me a little bit different has been super beneficial for me in this space of wellness and well-being and really allowing me to kind of open my mind to the good in the world, because then you start to see the good things too. And I think that's important to think about, because it's not always people driving up the shoulder or not holding the door open for you.
Well, it's funny you say that. I always say it's the Dee Dee in me. My mother, Donna, is Dee Dee, and my mother is like, anybody who knows my mother will be like, well, Donna loves everybody. Donna thinks everybody's nice, and Donna doesn't know. And for years, it was always like a Donna, Donna. But now I find myself giving the benefit of I don't get road rage. Like, people cut me off and I go, and my kids are like Caleb's like, you gonna let that? And I'm like,
right.
He's like, how do you do that? I'm like, I just did it. What are you talking
choice.
About? No, Amanda does it.
Does not bother
I think
me.
the way she handles her road rage is she talks to the cars.
do.
As if the cars are a living thing.
That is
She'll
true.
be like,
Well,
hey,
that's a
Toyota
good-
Camry, what are you doing?
Right.
She's not talking to the person in the car. She's talking to the car.
The
Or
Camry.
sometimes I'll identify them by their license plate state.
Yeah.
I'll be like,
Oh,
hey,
well, yeah.
Delaware, stay in your own lane.
It's
Like,
funny. She does it like traveling.
That's hilarious. But I always say that I get it from my mother, and it's a blessing. For a while, for many years, I was like, yeah, what is up with her? But
Right.
the truth is that she's not nearly as shitty about the world. She bops around. She loves everybody.
Yeah.
And she's always like, if you ask her about anything, she's like, baby, we know that it's not that easy. And
Well-
that, it's like, if you can harness that, and it sounds like that's what
that's
your
what I was going to
vibe
say. There's
is.
something to
Yeah.
go back to that idea, because again, our brains are constantly taking in information from the world around us, and it's trying to figure out whether we're safe or not. That's it. That's really, from an evolutionary perspective, what our brains are doing. Like, are you safe? Are you not safe? And if you're not safe, here's how we're going to deal with it.
Right.
And what happens is that when we are being negatively impacted by the world around us constantly, we're constantly functioning in a state of crisis, really. Your brain is on fight or flight or freeze mode. So, depending on what type of person you are and your stress response, is how you're going to react. So
Right.
if you're constantly seeing the world as being, quote unquote, a dangerous spot, and that's how your brain is perceiving that information, you're going to be responding in that way. And being in a constant state of stress is not good for us. It just isn't, which
It's the
sounds
squeeze.
cliche.
Yeah, the
But,
squeeze.
we know from research that stress and ongoing and prolonged, stress reactions and stress response is not good for us. It's not good for us physiologically. It's not good for us psychologically. So being able to really recognize, what's happening in our brains and how we're reacting to it, and being able to control it. Like I said, I could get super mad, but instead I'm like, he must be late for something important. And I'm like, go ahead, blue Camry.
Yeah.
Right. That's a better way. It's a better way, and
helps.
you'll feel better. And listen, I've been reading a lot of Buddhism, and it's a Buddhist way. I mean, really, it's like,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it's
It
very.
takes me a good bit to get angry. I mean, it
That's
really
true.
does.
No, I know
well,
that.
maybe not angry, but like just
No, you're always. I always feel like you always zap out about stuff I didn't see coming. Like, that's always the thing with you, is almost like, wow, is that wow, But it doesn't. You don't get angry. You don't get nutty very easily.
I don't like to either.
Right.
You're scary when you're mad.
Oh, I know. It's so fun. You should have been around when he was drunk. Well, I guess you are. I was saying, you should have seen the. Well, anyway. Yeah. But
Yeah. Edit that out. No, I'm kidding.
no, we love that levity. Yeah,
It's
levity's
fine.
wonderful.
It's human.
Oh,
Sure,
yes.
sure.
Vulnerability is
I'm
good.
fun.
I don't know. I mean, like, continue.
So,
Do you have? Yeah.
No, I think just, making sure that the whole purpose of being here today, should we start over? Just kidding.
Not at all. I thought this was great.
No, I'm kidding.
I think this is going great.
It's really just making sure that, we have these observation months. And actually today, which I know this is going to be recorded and then edited and then produced, but today technically is, if I can see my watch, August 19th.
Yep.
Which is National Potato Day, if you didn't know that.
Yeah, no.
I'm
Right?
gonna have a potato.
Uh-oh.
So, I mean, I can't wait to eat a potato,
Yeah.
right? But my point being is that every single solitary day is something.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, wait a
really
second.
is.
Did you know that, or is it on your? Or do you look forward to
Did
National
you hear it on
Potato Day?
WTMD?
I did hear it on WTMD.
Okay. I was going to say, do you mark your calendar
Right.
for Potato Day?
No, I
That's
get all
huge.
I get all of my.
She has a well documented calendar.
Wow.
I do not.
I do actually because I have to know what's happening.
I
where
almost don't even know how to use
Right.
it. I have Stavi's calendar hanging in my garage, and I write things on it. I write, dude, it's August right now. I can't remember
I
the
love
name,
this, man.
but it's him in the Roman Colosseum, nude,
I
with a
Incredible.
discus.
Dude,
It's a
Stavi,
discus.
do you hear this, baby? Please, we're Baltimore. Let's
Your
do
ass
this.
is in my
Yeah.
garage, dude.
Yeah, let's do this.
No, but I do want you to talk about a little bit about the path to happy.
Oh, the path to happy. Yes. No,
Yeah,
thank
tell
you
me
for
about
bringing that up. Yeah. So again, going back into this whole sort of how I got here, I got into this well-being arena, I guess, 2.5 years ago, and having a little bit of a background in behavioral health and nursing and really being interested in people, I started thinking about what next, what am I going to do with my career? What do I want to do? And, my historical answer has always been go back to school. So that was on the table and still maybe might be. But thanks to political things that we won't get into, I think my student loans are deferred again because nobody can seem to figure it out. So anyway, because some of my motivation was like, oh, I have all these student loans. Maybe I'll just go back to school so I can get away from that for a minute. And so that's always been my solution. And, that's worked for me for a really long time. And part of my idea was maybe I'll just go back to school. And in that quest, I started researching and started looking into coaching and what that looked like and what I needed to be a coach and how I could be a coach and what does that look like out there in the world? And it's actually quite fascinating. It's one of the largest growing businesses out there right now is the coaching industry. Highly unregulated, by the way. So be careful if you're hiring coaches and looking for
Now you're
support.
talking about mental wellness coaching or
So
something
it could
to
be
that?
anything.
It could be career counseling. I
Career
mean,
coaching, life
it's very
coaching,
broad.
health It's very broad
I got you.
and unregulated, which means basically, so for example, in healthcare, there's lots of regulations about who can do what and what levels of licensure you need and et cetera. In coaching, it's kind of, hey, you don't even have to be certified. You can just say you're a coach.
Right.
So I started looking into this because, again, I was really interested in working with people and really wanting to help people be the best version of themselves.
Right.
And the interesting thing is that, I started out in, behavioral health and in a psych career. And, when you look at professionals in that space, and thank goodness for these folks, they are coaching and therapy and mental health and all of these different things and what's regulated and what isn't regulated. Coaching is highly unregulated. And the difference between coaching and therapy is that the reason I was attracted to this concept of coaching is all about moving forward.
Right.
We're looking at right now, today, and what's going on with you, and we're going to make a plan and we're going to move forward. Whereas therapy is very much about unpacking the past. Right. And there's space for both things. There are many, many people out there that could benefit from a coach. And there are many people out there that might want to coach but really need therapy. And it's the responsibility of myself and my colleagues as professionals to be able to make sure that we're directing people in the right way. That's your just professional responsibility. So I feel really fortunate that I have that background because I feel very clear about where I am and where I sit. Because what I decided to do was go back and pursue some education and some certifications in the coaching environment. So that's what I'm doing. I have, all of my, nursing degrees and my history and education there, and then took a certification to be a certified health and wellness coach. Again, took a class to be a clarity catalyst teacher, which is very much about tapping into your creativity and really sort of these concepts of, just letting people be and really trying to view the world in a different way. And that's sort of where I landed now, which is what Davis was alluding to about the path to happy. So the path to happy is this idea. It's been an idea for a really long time that is getting some momentum now. But the Path to Happy is a business that I have started that is a coaching business. And the Path to Happy is the goal of Path to Happy is to really help people just be the best versions of themselves. That's really what the goal is. And whatever that is for you, and whatever that is for you, and whatever that is for them. So what does that look like? It's coaching. It is not therapy. If I was ever contacted by somebody and I have what we would call a discovery call, and we believe that they, or I believe that, they really need therapy, that would be the direction that I would appropriately send them in. Again, coaching is really about people kind of being stuck, wanting to move on to maybe another space in their life.
Like if a young mother were to call you and she has a baby and she's leaving her man and she doesn't have a job, she doesn't know what she's going to do, but she's going to just do all this kind of stuff. Would she call you and you would help her, or would it be like it's not like that? You're the next step after she gets where she's going and she's trying to, is it like that? Or
I think that's a fair question. I think it really depends. It
Right.
depends on where they are mentally.
Right.
Are you stable? Are you functioning? Are you, doing the things that need to be done and taking care of yourself and all of those things? Or do you need to be evaluated by licensed professional in the psychiatric environment?
Right.
And I will never promote people not seeking out medical advice first if necessary.
Yeah, right.
We always have to rule those things out because maybe there is something going on.
Yeah, right,
It could be all kinds of things, but it would just really depend on the person and what their needs are, and you may not always know either. You could have 3 conversations with somebody and then be like, oh,
Right.
I'm gonna have to terminate this relationship and get you to the right person.
Right.
And that happens. It
Right,
happens
sure.
a lot because we're good at putting up smoke and mirrors.
Sure.
I'm good at it.
Right.
So it really depends. But the idea of coaching is really for people to just get unstuck. And what that means is different for everybody. But really, people that are feeling like maybe they're having difficulty setting boundaries. Maybe they feel that they want to change their career. Maybe they are feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and stressed by home life situations, and you can be overwhelmed and stressed and frustrated and not have clinical depression or not need a psychiatrist and medication, and that's really what the goal is of the coaching business, at least from my viewpoint, is that we have a responsibility to make sure that we can very clearly tell the difference between people that really need licensed professional help or that we can help them. Because the idea with coaching is that I, as a coach, am my client's biggest cheerleader. And I have to want to coach you. I have to like you, quite frankly. I have to believe in you and what you're doing and stand behind you and motivate you to head in the right direction. And that's a huge part of coaching, is that you've got your clients back and the ideas are coming from them. You're just helping them get there.
Sure.
I'm not, giving you ideas or advice. It's just not, I'm not diagnosing you with anything. It's really about working together to be able to achieve your happiness.
Right.
And that is where the Path to Happy was born, because it's this idea that, get on your path to happy.
Yeah, well, that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, and you have to, like, even to be in that field, you have to have a philanthropic heart, because, it is a strange field, but it's a worthwhile field, especially like you said, when you, the unpacking, you sit down with a psychologist, whatever one that you sit down with, and they are unpacking. Right. And you're reliving the past and you're figuring out what is your problem. But there's a whole edge or a whole end of psychology, as we're finding out, that isn't addressed, which is different.
Right.
And so that is interesting. Mm-hmm. And the unregulated thing is just for now. They will regulate it. It's just a matter of time.
It is. And it's about how much time and what's happening with exchange of funding. So it's always about money.
Absolutely.
If there's not money to be made, nobody cares.
Well, and also if
that's the reality
if somebody coaches someone badly, that's when the regulations will start coming.
Right. And the scary thing is that happens everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. You can be a therapist and not be a great therapist. You can be a physician and take advantage of young girls.
Even with regulations.
Even with regulations, right. So, it's really about the person. And I think that's so important in the coaching environment, is that, when you're hiring me to be your coach, you're hiring me. You're trusting me that I have your best interests in mind, and that I'm going to show up for you authentically, and that I'm listening to you, and I'm not going to, tell you what to do. I want to help guide you in the direction that's going to be fulfilling. And it's amazing. I could sit here forever and talk about tips and tricks and things that we talk about in the well-being space. I'm related to time management and the stories that we tell ourselves and how we talk to ourselves in our heads and all the benefits of deep breathing and
organization,
clear the clutter, time management, setting boundaries. Like, it's a lot. And
you're good at it.
I'm good at it.
Time management.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
I mean, well, here's the thing.
TikTok.
My wife might say different, and she's right to a certain extent. I'm good. I'm obsessive and nuts. So I'm good time management with work-related stuff.
Okay. And I think you make a great point, because we don't always have to be the same in the same space, in the same role. And I've really leaned into that recently too, where, again, I know professionally that I can handle the stories and the things that are brought to me and the education that helps me do better of taking care of people. But at home, like, what was the show I couldn't watch because they threw the kid out of the tower and then I wouldn't watch it anymore?
Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah. I was
when
like,
Jamie threw Bran out of the tower, she was done.
I'm out of here.
That was episode 1.
Right. Yeah.
He lived.
Yes.
I mean, he was fine.
I heard.
He ended up becoming king of Westeros.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Right. It's so funny. The banging brother and sister wasn't it. It was the throw out of
Not even.
Correct. Exactly.
I mean, even the importance of, like, partner, spouse,
right.
like just a random example is Disney. Like, when we've gone to Disney with the kids way back, I mean, Christ, we haven't been there 7 years now. 2016 was the last time. She plans the whole trip, like, handles everything, like the reservations and all that, because I can't.
Right,
like,
me neither.
But I can get us to all those things she planned, like that.
Sense of direction.
Yes.
Just and keeping timetables.
And time.
Like, we got to be on this train by this
she
time.
planned it all,
breakfast.
but I can't plan it all.
Right, yeah, I can't plan it.
Once you plan it, I can make it happen.
Yeah. You can execute.
Yeah.
I refer to that as Vacation Davis.
Nice. Oh,
And
I know
Vacation Davis is a whole different
The itinerary.
Davis. Yeah, he is on it. It's
Yeah.
so weird. He's got maps, and we're in.
I went on vacation with him to
amazing.
Florida
Amazing.
before we went. You know,
I'm like, how? And speaking of showing up differently in different spaces, I'm like, can we get some more of this at home? Because I like vacation.
But I take my studio in my garage, I clean it all up, and I'm like, oh my God, this is great. I can get things done. And then I got to turn around and turn back around, and it's a disaster again.
Sure.
It's so stressful in there.
Well,
Like
is
these
it
heads,
stressful to him?
Yes. That's why I clean it up all the time.
It's so messy. I can't
so
even
cool.
stand to go in there.
I do. She can attest to this. I do function well in chaotic
that's the thing.
situations in that sense.
Or
He can.
disorganized chaos.
Yeah.
But I don't like to.
Yeah.
I don't love it.
But we do have a topic and tip called Clear the Clutter.
Mm-hmm.
And we could clear the clutter, and sometimes it's mental clutter, and sometimes it's physical clutter.
Yeah.
But the concept is that we hold on to things and they agonize us.
Yeah.
And so mentally, for example, maybe you have to follow up with a doctor's appointment, or maybe you have to pay a ticket, or maybe your registration needs to be renewed, or something that has to happen that you haven't taken care of.
Something simple.
It's always simple, but it sits in our brain and it takes up space. And so we sit there and we think about it, and we think about it, and we ruminate about it instead of just doing it. And that's something that we refer to.
I
You're the
cancel a
worst.
dentist appointment. I don't want to call them back to reschedule because I'm afraid they're going to yell at me.
Right. Well, see, isn't that funny? I know. It's like, what is that? I
Right.
mean,
You're paying them.
Yeah,
Call
I know.
them.
They're not going to yell at me. They're just going to be like, you got to get in here.
I always talk to myself. I'm always like, what are they going to fucking yell at?
Right.
Yeah.
Just call.
Right,
You know,
right,
but it's
right.
like you do have that impulse of like
right,
where, you know,
right.
they're going to be mean.
But
And
what
that's
happens
just us.
is it
Everybody
mentally
does it.
clogs your brain.
Yes.
And it causes you to be unproductive. It causes you to think about these things and to spend time on these things that aren't necessary. So
Right.
it's this concept that, you know, if we were sitting here in a workshop or something, I would say to you, write down something that's been on your brain recently that you haven't gotten to, that you haven't taken care of. And you would write whatever that is down, and then you would make a commitment that by next, I don't know, Monday, you would have taken care of it. You would have called to make the dentist appointment, or taken the dog to the vet, or got your admissions done, because it clears that clutter of your brain. Because again, it's exhausting to constantly be thinking that you have things to do or take care of things. And then of course there's physical clutter too, like the garage, but you know.
And
Well,
structure.
one thing I do like
Yeah.
doing is making the bed in the mornings.
You're very strict.
That's an important thing.
And it was because of an admiral. It was like a YouTube clip I saw of some admiral at the Naval Academy. I think it was the Naval
Gave a graduation
Academy. Gave a
speech.
graduation speech, and he was talking about always make your bed first, because no matter what happens to you during the day, you're always going to come home to a made bed.
Right.
And I mean, his was a lot more detailed. And
it was that no matter what happens throughout the day, at least you've accomplished something.
Yeah, at least you've accomplished something and you're coming home to a made bed.
That's what my dad used to say.
I disagree with
I
that.
never made the bed, but he would say,
Right.
he
I
would
think it's
say,
stupid. You're getting back into it. Why would you make it? What a waste of time.
I hate getting into
That was my
I hate
credo.
getting into an unmade bed.
that was my credo, but my dad used to say that too. It's like, at least you accomplished something,
Right.
you know, you just, and also, there's a lot there. Peterson says that, you know, that if you shouldn't judge other people, especially like the first thing you have to do is take care of your bed. If you don't take care of your bed or make your own bed, don't espouse judgment on other people, because the first thing you have to take care of is you. I don't know, you know, I don't necessarily agree because I don't make my fucking bed, but it's an interesting point, and
Neither
I
do
think
I.
he's a clinical psychologist. So that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Even if I sleep later than him, he still makes it.
Yeah, once
'Cause
as
I'm
soon
not-
as
he
I get home
knows.
from work,
He'll make
Nice,
it.
you're
I make
rock
it.
and rolling, man. I know
Not
I
messing
always
with that,
dug you.
please.
So one thing I do want to mention is that for those listening and watching at home, if you're a teenager or if you have teenagers, is that the internet, like there was a book released, there was a book released a couple years back by a guy named Jonathan Haidt, and I put it on the thread. It's called The Anxious Generation, but it's about how social media has affected our youth, and it's got statistics in it, and it is a serious problem. With suicide and these teenagers and
cyberbullying.
Yeah, and so it's like there's a whole other level of this that needs to be monitored. Or read that book, because it's very serious, and it can be corrected if we all agree of the severity of it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
It's really tragic. I mean, when you get into thinking about statistically speaking, you know, not to be super doom and gloom, but the harsh reality is that death by suicide is what, the 10th leading cause of death in our country.
12.
It fluctuates depending on where you read it, because it also changes within age groups.
Right.
The astonishing thing about that is, so basically we can say this for sure, is that about 50,000 people a year die by suicide in our country, which is just tragic.
Right.
And of those 50,000, the age ranges of folks get categorized. And when you start looking at ages of people that are taking their own lives, that's the chilling part about this, because when you think of children,
highest among adults 45 to 64.
Yes, and then the children,
10 to 34. Second leading cause of death among individuals, 10 to 34.
10
That's
to
from
34,
the National
jeez.
Institute of Mental Health.
Right,
yeah,
That's a wild thought.
And
it is a wild thought.
there's lots of statistics. I mean, you can look these things up. They're not hidden. You can look up on, you know, the National Institute of Health, you know, CDC, etc. But the alarmingness of when I think of children,
Right.
that are not only attempting or even taking their own lives, but even knowing that that's an
option.
An option, I guess. I don't know if option is a good word, but yes,
A solution. I mean, I don't know what the word would
Right.
be.
Solution is what they use, what you would use if you're in that
I mean,
state
that
of
is
mind.
just really scary. And when I think about social media, and that could be a whole nother soapbox of mine that I won't get on to, but the impact of social media on folks. I am a 47-year-old woman with a life of my own, and there are things that I see sometimes on social media that really strike a chord with me, like an emotional sort of zap. And I think to myself, I am, you know, close to 50.
Sure.
Like, I have an amazing circle of friends and family. I have, you know, things that I'm doing. We're busy. And there's things that I see sometimes that I'm like, it stings, or it gets to you, whether it's, you know, a picture or people doing things. And I know rationally it doesn't make any sense. But I think that social media can really play a lot of tricks on us when we start thinking about people's highlight reels and
you're a clinical person. If you're a kid in that environment,
that's my exact point. You know, when I think about, if I am a 47-year-old educated, well-supported person, and I feel that little zap of what the hell, you know,
that impulse.
Can you imagine being a 13-year-old girl? I can't even imagine. I mean, it was hard enough to be 13 back in the 80s. You know, we didn't have cell phones and social media.
Sure.
You know, I'm not even really going to speak about it because I don't know much about it, but the kids had brought up to me recently about a very famous case of a young girl in Texas that recently died by suicide. And, you know, our 13-year-old asked me about it. And it's funny because I didn't look into it.
Right.
I didn't look it up. I didn't research it. I didn't go. And again, because this is now my personal life. Like, professionally, I would have been like, wonder what happened. Let me look into that. Personally, I just couldn't even handle it. It was enough that my 13-year-old came to me to ask me about it.
Right.
And, you know, we had a conversation about bullying and social media and just being, responsible for your own emotions. And that's a tough conversation,
It is.
with these kids that are maybe feeling left out or maybe being teased, or I don't know, you fall asleep and you have a terrible look on your face and someone takes a video of you and you're snoring, or you fart, or you're 13 and
Dude,
now there's
it
something
is.
out there being passed around of you're like, maybe you had an ugly face, or you have, bodily functions that are happening, or maybe there was a body part that got exposed. Can you imagine?
Yeah, the stakes have,
it's so awful,
raised
and
the bullying stakes from VHS to 4K Blu-ray. And I'm serious.
Interesting
Yeah.
analogy, but
And it's like
true.
when I grew up fat in the 80s,
Yeah.
where they made you play shirts and skins. There was no hiding.
Doing the
If
truffle
they
shuffle, baby.
Right. If they did that nowadays, every asshole in the world would have caught video.
Oh, yeah.
All
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
like, so you have to. So anyway, parents and kids listening, know this: social media is insidious. There is benefit to it from a business perspective, from a adult perspective, but it is insidious. If Satan is real, he made the internet. Think about that.
Well, I think
I'm
one
not
of
saying
the
I buy it. I'm
things-
just saying.
I think one of the important things to think about with kids and cyberbullying and suicide is that, I have life experience. So although I do get that little tinge of like, I don't even know what the word is, but like that little
Impulse.
lightning bolt of like, oh my God, I'm being.
dopamine.
Yeah,
Well, there's
something.
that too. And yes, and that's a whole nother thing. But, when you see something on social media and you automatically feel slighted by it, for example, and I feel that again at, close to 50, stable for the most part, but I also see things on social media that people post that I know, and I also know the full story, or I know the other stories,
Right.
or I know beyond the highlight reel because I have had life experience and I'm
Right.
older and I know what's going on. When you're children and you're seeing these things, or you're being excluded, or you're being put out there for maybe doing something embarrassing, you think that that's it, or that everybody out there has these like beautiful, perfect lives,
right.
because you don't know any different. You don't have the life experience to recognize that there is, another side to all of this.
Yeah.
So when you're feeling, and again, this all ties back into what we're here to talk about today, is that when you're feeling isolated, and when you're feeling rejected, and when you're feeling like people, don't like you, that leads to people taking their own lives,
Right.
because it's a horrible way to feel. And when we're young, what do we do with that information? Who are we telling? Who are we talking to about it? Do we have friends that aren't bullying us? Do we have an ability to get away from it? And I don't know if these kids do or not. And I
Right.
think that
I don't know if they always ever even realize something so stupid and so simple, an insult or anything. They don't understand the repercussions and how it can truly affect somebody, and then
right.
Well, think about
they
it. Well,
keep going, they keep doing it, or there's always just plain like
Jerks.
jerks
Right.
that know exactly what they're doing.
jerk-
think
store
about it,
called.
when we were growing up, we would be like, everybody would say,
They're running out of you.
The jerk store called.
that's so fun.
Doesn't matter.
sorry.
You're their best seller.
When-
I digress.
We're Seinfeld fans.
No, I know, but I love that. When we were growing up, it was like the bullying ended when you left the building, you could get away from it.
Yeah.
Sure,
that's a great
like
point.
if you were being bullied in school, when you went home, you weren't.
Right. And it's
But
like
the problem
this,
is you knew you had
the
to go back the
problem-
next day.
Well, and the
Right.
problem will grow, and you
Sure.
can watch it grow by the numbers.
Yeah.
Like you can sit there and you're just watching it
Yeah.
grow.
Right, because it's like, oh my God, everybody liked this post that just had my face looking
Right,
ridiculous because I
right.
fell asleep on the bus.
And
coming
then
home
if
from
you
the field
read the
trip.
comment section, forget about it, baby. And if you ride that impulse to fruition as a kid, we're talking
Yeah.
about suicidal thoughts, and it don't. It's bullshit. Kids suck.
Yeah.
You know,
kids are mean, and you know, it's really scary. And I think that that's one of the things for parents is that, you know, be involved. And we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Trust me, there are things I'm doing wrong probably right now, you know. As I sit here, I'm somehow doing something wrong with my kids. But, you know, but I laugh because I'm like, am I? Are they home? Where are they? Do you know where our
No,
kids
but
are?
we
No.
do.
But
I will give us credit. That's one thing we instill in our kids is I mean, and just to be simplified, like be nice to people.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Right. Oh, I will.
Right.
Lose my
I
minds about
hate
that.
And they are like they are
Most of the time,
genuinely nice kids, not necessarily to us,
But I also
but to their peers.
That's what
they
I
are.
would say.
talk to them about things. Like I ask them things.
Yeah.
I ask them these horrible questions that you don't want to have conversations with. And it's not about, you know, like sex ed and pot. It's about like,
And it's not even about what they're doing. It's like, is anybody like messing with you?
Yeah, right.
Is
Those are the
anybody making you
conversations,
uncomfortable?
Sure.
Right. It's not about, you know, the things that you think you would be talking to your kids about. It's more about, gosh, are people being mean, or how are the kids in school, or is anything weird going on? Like I ask those questions all the time, but I it's in my nature, and I know a lot about that side of things.
Sure.
And you know, I think when it comes to parents, and it's like, you know, I don't know how other people operate. I can't even pretend to know, but I can tell you that, you know, passwords and cell phones and lock codes and social media accounts, like they're mine. They're not yours.
Right.
So, you know, be appropriate. Don't make dumb decisions. If you put something out there, it's going to be there forever. But also, like at any given time, if I want to open your phone, I'm going to.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think that's important too to think about, and just having these conversations and being, again, having conversations, making people realize, you know, that these things are real, and we can be seriously impacted by the way people treat us, and especially our younger generation of folks, because they just don't have the resilience. They don't know that things will get better.
Well, that's my thing. Is it's always about, you know, it's like every single thing that you know has worked for me, whether it was getting off alcohol or losing weight, starts with identifying a time frame and being like, if I can survive for 1 hour, I'm going to start fresh in 1 hour and then try to make it one more hour. It's literally 1 hour at a time, which brings me back to the AA. And it's not that I did all the steps or anything, but if you're in that mind space of a suicidal impulse or thought, and you're watching this, try to consider how you felt the last time you felt good, and realize that there is a world where your mind will lose this impulse and it will be back to reason again. And if you can just survive that time, it's so paramount. But again, you know, it's like you're not in the right headspace when you're there. So it's like, now I'm in the right headspace, so it's obvious.
And that's the really hard point.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important that we are utilizing resources, that we are getting help, because trying to trust ourselves in these delicate spaces is garbage, man. Like we need to have people looking out for us. All of us do, you know, because we're not always okay. And like you said, if you have to be able to monitor yourself and respond better or different when being faced with a stressful thoughts or situation, I just don't see us being good at that, because again, our stress response is taking over, and when we are under stress, we are responding in that space.
Right.
So
even if you want to be that way, your what do you call it? Your evolutionary self will
and remember
hinder it or
too, in the
something.
suicide environment, I guess, if that's a way to say it, but for folks that are experiencing suicidal ideation, and I think that's important to think about too is that, there's different terminology. So suicidal ideation, people that are contemplating or thinking about suicide. When you're in that space, it's very dark, and it's very isolating, and you don't see there as being another solution. Right. It's sometimes it is impulse, and and a lot of times we see that in our, again, we were talking about this earlier, but alcohol involved, drugs involved, and then there's impulsive decisions that get made. Absolutely. But for folks that are really experiencing the darkness of it, and just the isolation, and just the hopelessness, you're not really thinking about, if I could get through this hour, because it doesn't matter. You're hopeless. It's right. Yeah. Right. It's hours, it's days. I could be laying in bed for days and not wanting to get up, Right. So I think it's important to think that, it's different for everyone. And I think that's what makes it so complicated.
And also, we were talking earlier, and it is true, like a lot of times the scariest part is someone who you've known has been so upset and this and that, and all of a sudden they're happy. Right. And it's like that sometimes is scarier, because a lot of times they've reserved themselves, and it's a weight off their shoulder. Well, it's just a weight off their shoulder, and so it's so damn complicated.
It is complicated. I mean,
it's like,
right.
Right. It's like pissing.
And when you add stigma involved, I work in a healthcare environment, and there's lots of fear in my world when we think about folks that are being licensed and regulated and insured, and we're being examined and asked all kinds of questions and background checks, and if I say that I have had struggles with depression in the past, is this going to impact?
Right, they'll be like, well, she can't work here because
right,
of whatever. Yeah,
exactly,
sure.
And that's a real true fear for folks, and there is work being done to kind of navigate those waters a little bit better.
Sure.
Because it matters, and it's the reason why a lot of people don't seek help, right. And why there's such a huge, unfortunate number of folks in the healthcare environment that are taking their own lives. It's really sad, and you don't hear about it. People don't talk about it.
Tough feeling.
Yeah. But there is this fear of stigma. There's this fear of, losing everything you've worked so hard for. Sure. But the pressure and the unpredictable environment can be really daunting on folks.
Absolutely. I mean,
yeah. So it's hard. And like I said, there's so many different levels and different facets to this, and how people react and how people respond, and why we do the things that we're doing. Right. And again, that's why we have to pay attention. We have to ask each other, how are you? How are you? How are you really? I like the concept of check on your good friends, because I'm that person that's usually good, but I'm not. Right. I'm not always good. Sometimes I'm literally freaking out.
Right.
But there's a lot of people out there that are usually pretty good, right, or pretty strong. And, allowing people just to not be okay is so important, because, these things ebb and flow.
Yeah. Sometimes a weight is lifted if you talk
about it.
Yeah. If you just get that.
Again, it goes back to peer support, right. Being able to talk about it, and then being able to be normalized. If I reach out to my girlfriend and I say, wow, I've just been so frustrated. The boys are messy, and Davis is five businesses, 4 businesses. I don't know. He's busy, and I'm feeling this certain way. Just to have someone say, wow, I would feel really frustrated by all of those things too. Mm-hmm. What are some things that you can do to make yourself feel less frustrated? Just being validated in how I feel has a huge impact on our mental health and our ability to cope. So, there's not all these grand gestures, and I think we get caught up in that mind of or like that line of thought is that, we used to be able to do these big, huge things and these big, huge interventions. But the reality of it is sometimes it isn't huge. Sometimes we literally just have to be validated, or for someone to say, wow.
Or pick up the phone.
Or be present.
Right. Or if someone just to look at you and say, wow, that probably does suck.
Right.
You know, and you being like, oh my gosh, someone finally understands, right?
Right.
And that's, you know, a lot of times what people need to hear. You know, but when we think about, you know, this terrible, you know, suicide ality that happens not only in our country but around the world, you know, it's really just unfortunate.
It
but
is
we
so unfortunate.
have to remember that, you know, people are really at their wits' end.
Right.
You know, and
and the environment the way it is today, and just again the social media and just the polarization. Everybody, look out for people and just be kind.
Right.
Like, I'm so sick of dumb, hateful. I hate.
right.
Fucking sick of.
Hate is so stupid.
I'm
Hate's such a jerk.
No, it's a crazy.
Right.
It's been a crazy,
I will say
crazy
this,
world.
I will
right
say
now,
one
but-
thing too, is that something to really think about is that, you know, people using suicide as a manipulation. This is like one of those things that really just makes me cringe when I hear it. If anybody ever says or alludes to suicide, don't ever have the response that they're just trying to get attention. I hope to gosh they got yours.
Right. It's not, it's
You
not
know,
good business.
but you know, the idea that somebody would say, I'm suicidal. Oh, good. Now I have your attention. Like, that's not healthy to begin with.
Right,
So
right.
even if that is what the intervention is, or they're what they're using to have their needs met, that really needs to be explored.
Absolutely.
Because that's scary.
Especially if it works for them once and then they get older, their impulse might take them to fruition.
Right,
If it,
right,
you know,
right.
it has to be addressed.
Right. So, you know, those things are really scary to me. And I hear people say that a lot, like, oh, they're just doing that for attention. You know, you hear that. I feel like I hear that in younger populations.
Sure.
You know, and that's a horrible thing to think, because if they are doing it for attention and you don't give it to them, are they going to up the ante? Like, what
Sure.
happens
Yeah.
next?
I mean, even if you're saying they're doing it for attention, okay.
Right.
Right.
They're looking for
Right. They
attention.
obviously didn't get yours
Right.
yet.
Yeah, they're seeking
So-
someone's
Right.
attention.
We need to do something about this.
Right.
That's serious.
Right.
You know,
It's
so
just a way of reaching out. Like,
yeah.
generally.
I think it's important to remember, like I said earlier, there's so many resources. You know, 988 is certainly a number to call. You know, if you are in crisis, you know, the emergency department, I feel like every ER nurse that I've ever known that could potentially listen to this is like, stop telling people to come to the ER.
Right. They'll be
Right?
like, what the
are you
hell?
doing? You know, but you know, that's what the emergency department is for. And
Sure.
unfortunately, in this region and probably across the country, there are some standalone little crisis spots that do exist, even here in Maryland, but they're few and far between. You know, people go to the emergency department. It is the right place
The one-stop
to
shop.
go. You know, it is some sort of, you know, it's your point of entry into the system to get yourself assistance, but it doesn't have to be. You know, there's the 988 number. I'm just going to keep saying it so people remember. Put it in your phone. You might not need it, but somebody else might. But you know, being able to go online and get resources. There's just lots of help out there for people, and people don't have to struggle.
Right. Right.
You know, and that no matter what is going on with you at this moment, if it feels completely dark, if it feels like you're never going to be able to crawl your way out of it, that, you know, there's a billboard up right now down Hanover Street Bridge area, and I saw it the other day, and it said 20% of compulsive gamblers attempt suicide. 20%. And, you know, that really is a horrible thing to think about.
Yep.
But I get it. You know, you're gambling money, you're becoming financially strained, and now you're feeling hopeless and helpless, and you're embarrassed, and there's shame, and there's no way to dig yourself out of this, and maybe you owe people money and you could be in trouble, and sometimes it feels like the only option is to get out of here, but there is hope. There are lots of options. Out of the 50,000 people, God forbid, that have died by suicide, there was also 1.6 million that attempted, that were able to get help and to survive. That's good shit. And so we know that treatment is extremely effective. Yeah. We know that people can recover and get the help that they need. We just have to get people to the resources. Yep. And that, I think, is the hardest thing, is you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink,
Right. Yeah, it is a really complicated problem. I mean, I guess like every problem, it's very complicated when you really drill down on it. But it's so complicated. But I do think that we're doing, we're shining light on it this way is a good, it's a good olive branch.
We'll put some resources even on our page and on our links.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about, again, Sanity Lounge and just the folks that you have in here, and, just the audience in itself. If one person is impacted by, this candor of conversation today, it matters.
It does matter.
100%.
It matters. A great resource.
And I think it will.
Yeah. One of the phenomenal resources that I'll plug is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. You can literally just Google AFSP. It comes right up. They have so many resources, so many great things that they're doing in that space. Nice. In October, and you can look it up on their website. They have tons of events around the country, actually. But in October, they will be having an event in DC, and there's an event in Baltimore where they do what they call the Out of the Darkness Walk. And people go and they walk for suicide prevention. And the folks that go are either survivors, or maybe they've lost someone close to them, or maybe they're there supporting someone that lost someone close to them, or maybe they just really care about the cause. But lots of people come together, and they, have this fundraiser and this opportunity for people to go and remember folks that have been lost, and celebrate second chances for some.
That's good. That's good stuff. Yeah. And it's coming to Baltimore.
Baltimore, DC, and quite frankly, everywhere.
Yeah, it's probably
around the country.
Right.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. So those are taking place coming up very shortly in our society.
Nice.
So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, like I said, we'll be posting links and information on the on the website. We have a new website coming soon.
Yes.
It should be coming
really
real
exciting.
soon.
Yes.
We're going to have a lot of resources on there for not just about this particular conversation, about a lot of, it's kind of a surprise.
Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff coming.
But on the YouTube channel, and I mean, all the any relevant links and information I'll have.
Yeah.
Me and Amanda will work together to get some information out there, and just links that you can click on. But my message is just be present, be kind, and listen to people.
Right.
Yeah,
when they reach out.
Be in the moment. Like you said, be present. Really pay attention.
Right. Take it seriously and understand that everybody is in their own shit show, and if they come to you, it may be very, very, very serious, and even if it's above your pay grade, pretend until you figure out a plan or something, because
that's interesting you say that, because one of the things that we're currently working on at my day job, if you will, is really that concept that anybody can be there for anybody. It doesn't require any special skill sets. We do a lot of reminders of things that people should think about if someone's confiding in them. But, you know, it's basic skills. It's not rocket science.
Right.
But the concept is that we don't have to have the answers. We don't all have to be professionals in this space. I'm not. You know, I would refer someone or get them to the right level of treatment. Sure. And I think that's the huge message to send out there, is that you don't have to be an expert. No. You don't have to have all the answers. You know, if someone confides in you or someone tells you that they are contemplating or thinking about or going to harm themselves, then, you know, stay with them.
Yeah.
Ask if they have someone with them.
Right.
Don't leave them alone. You know, call to get them help. You know, it's very simple things, but you don't have to be the expert. You don't have to be able to fix it.
Just be silent and listen for a minute.
Right.
Just take it in and listen.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's the big part of this, is that, you know, that's why there are lots of really smart people out there doing really amazing work to be able to take care of folks in these spaces, because we're not the experts. I'm not, for sure. You know, I have a long history of working in behavioral health, and now I'm, you know, launching my own coaching business, and I really do have a lot of respect and a lot of experience and a lot of care for the behavioral health side of nursing and quite frankly the world. Right. But again, I can talk to people, and I can help them, and I can get them to the right space. Right. But I don't have to have all the answers, and I certainly am not the professional there.
And that website is www.thepathttohappy.com.
It is.
That's where you can find out more information about the coaching. Reach out, read more about Amanda, although you just learned a lot. It was.
Yeah.
And our email address, like if you want to reach out to Amanda through us, info@sanitylounge.com. Or if you want to reach out to us in general, I mean, anything.
Just, email
we're there.
The show.
Me and Brian are cool.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll listen.
We'll
listen. They can take it.
We'll give it a shot.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I've been there. Yeah, like we've been in we've been dark. I've been in dark places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So well, look, I really appreciate you. I love you to death, and you know,
me too.
You wrangled in Woe Davis, which is not an easy task. And
he was relentless.
You know, I know.
I was relentless.
You know, the funny story is about this, and I don't know if you'll end up cutting this out or not, but it's
I
a
will
really
not be cutting
funny story. Is that Davis and I met, and probably should have talked about this an hour ago, but I will say this. So we both lived in Fells Point at the time, and I worked at a place called El Mary's that is, I guess, still El Mary's.
Still
but now
El Mary's. New ownership. Tom and Mary retired. Congratulations,
and
Tom.
that just recently happened. But I worked at El Mary's, and Bill and Mary. Yeah. And of course, one of my very long-term besties who you worked with a million years ago, because it's such a small world.
Oh shit!
Yeah, Megan. I know we all worked there.
Sweeney State.
Exactly, Sweeney State. We all worked at Mary's.
She went on vacation with us this year.
Yes, she did. But we all worked at Mary's or visited Mary's on a regular basis, and I didn't know who Davis was at the time. I just worked there like one day a week because I was still in nursing school.
And I lived there.
Right.
He lived
and
there.
Davis was the cornerstone of the business.
Yeah, but like my one day a week there, I was never like crossing paths with him. And I was in there. It was in November of 2006. And Megan was talking about Davis and was like, you know who he is? And I was like, no, I really don't. He didn't look like that back then. Just he was like a regular guy.
Right. But he got regular guy look at that time, because he was a long-haired lunatic before that.
He's just dark-haired guy with a goatee. He was pretty handsome back then. I mean, not that you're not now.
Actually,
he's evolved.
That was part of my plan. I shaved my head because I heard she liked guys with shaved heads.
Yeah, he was just a regular guy back then. And Megan was like, yeah, you know Davis. You know who he is. And I was like, no, I really don't. And she's like, he comes in here all the time. She's like, his grandfather just died by suicide. And I was like, what? I was like, I have no idea who this person is. Like, oh my goodness. Like, of course, me being who I've always been, I was like, you need to introduce me to this
Right.
guy.
You're like, well, I got to talk to
right,
him. Right.
exactly. I was like, is he
Right.
okay? Like, I need to talk to this guy. And
that's serendipity in a
right.
strange,
It was really
you know,
wild. And,
way.
you know, I know, right? And
But
our paths did cross
is
very
what it
shortly
is.
after that. I mean, that month, I believe we met.
100%.
And we had a very short conversation about that because he didn't have much to say.
Yeah.
And
the clock
and then he just ignored me for like the next hour. We were sitting next to each other at a bar, and I was like, "Oh yeah," I was
My
like,
man.
I heard about you. I'm like, "I'm so sorry to hear about your grandfather. Like, are you okay? What's going on with your family?" Like me being me and asking.
Well, he
a
probably
million
did
questions.
not know how to handle that.
And he
kind
was
of-
just like,
right,
No.
right.
"I'm good," and like went back to like
right.
eating
He
some
said, I got
wings or-
beam.
you know, right? Exactly.
No, that I definitely
Yeah.
had that.
Right.
And I remember being like, well, damn, like this guy totally doesn't want to talk to me, you know? But it was shortly thereafter that
I did, in fact, want to talk to her.
Right. That's the irony
kept
of the
coming
situation
in
is
there.
right.
Yeah, I kept coming in there and bugging me. But
Well,
I
That's
had
in it.
I had Pole in the kitchen. Once things started rolling, I had Pole backing me up.
But yeah, Poe was given the nice
yeah,
little.
he was like in my
right,
head, like,
right,
you know.
right. The
But,
old Grabowski flex.
Right. And, you know, it is funny, though, thinking about that and looking back on that time, because that is how I
Yeah,
knew
that's
who he
interesting.
was,
I mean,
you
it
know,
is a
and-
weird thing of
Yeah.
serendipity. We always point it out.
It was an interesting time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
man.
really was. And we basically...
I mean, I think about. Just obviously, but I think about that. I wish my grandfather could have met you and
Right.
Garrett and
Yeah,
Lincoln.
yeah,
Like,
man.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah.
yeah.
And just I mean, I just know, and I was distant at the time,
Yeah.
but just a horrible thing, you know, for a family to go through.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
and I think that is unfortunately what happens is that when folks, you know, die by suicide, you know, the amount of people that are impacted and the communities that are impacted.
It's
and
insane.
it's so sad to think that all of these people that are so heartbroken, and the person
Couldn't feel it
couldn't
or,
feel
or
that.
didn't
Yeah.
realize
And that's
it
how
in the
dark of a
moment.
space.
It's devastating.
That's how dark it is. That's how deep that hole is that people are really stuck in.
So full disclosure,
Yeah.
I had a cousin, a very close cousin, kill himself, and I had an uncle kill himself, and I had a best friend and a bandmate kill himself, and then I had a high school friend. The first suicide I ever dealt with was a kid named Steve Shepard. I'm friends with his sister, very wonderful woman. Steve was a great guy, and he was with me elementary, middle school, high school, senior year. Asked a girl out. This is the story that we were told. I don't know. This is all due respect.
Sure.
To, you know, I love the guy. But the story was that he had asked somebody out to prom maybe, and they didn't go with him, and that was it. Wow. You know, and he was such a he sat next to me my entire I knew him very well, not like we weren't best friends or anything, but like he wasn't that type, it seemed, as it were.
Right.
Or, you know.
Sure.
But just like that, and that's what, I think that's why I always get obsessed with that impulse thing, because, you know, and then, but anyway, it is around you.
Yeah.
It will affect you. And if it hasn't affected you yet, that's the operative word. And so, you know, it's kind of like everybody should, you know, ask people how they are. Pay attention, especially in the times
Check
we're
on
in.
your friends. Check
And
on
your young
family.
ones with their social media and their bullying. And make sure keep your
with
kids
parents,
in check.
Right.
like-
Parents, be present and ask questions. Like
Sure.
Amanda said, they can't stress that enough. I mean,
Right.
ask questions.
Be
They don't answer it
kind.
the first time. Ask again.
Yeah. And you know, I think a lot of times too, we maybe, but I'm just going to say this, is that we expect other interventions. Like, you know, you send your kid
Right.
to school and maybe you would expect school to notice or work to notice. And the reality of it is that people are just busy.
They
and
have
they're in their own
right.
stuff.
Sure.
You know, so it is a scary thought that if folks don't have people close to them. But unfortunately, what we see over and over again when we have these, out of the darkness walks, or when there are funerals or memorial services for people, that doesn't really seem to be the case, that there are people that show up and there are people that are heartbroken. And, people feel like maybe they had no idea.
Right. It's the tragic irony.
It really is.
And
I think that's so hard. And, that again, really just checking on people. I can't say it enough.
Yep. Sure.
Seeing how people are and allowing people to be vulnerable.
Right.
Because it's easy to say that you're okay.
Right. Well, look, we're all about vulnerability at Sanity. I mean, we really are. Like, there's nothing, this kind of human condition type shit fascinates me. It's not a good time, but it's fascinating, and I want to help if I can. And I think that we are trying.
It's interesting when we think about the world right now and where we are, and we think about the political nature and all of the social injustice and just the confusing things that go on in our world. I mean, I don't even know if I'm supposed to eat carbs or not supposed to eat carbs, and then there's like much bigger things going on. But, you've got like, politics, and then like trickles down to like, oh, can I eat this or not? Sure. And so there's like many, many different levels.
There's so many levels of upset you can taste.
Exactly.
If you want.
Yes. And it comes
a lot of things to choose
from all facets, and from all directions. And I really do think about that. And, there's not one solution to fix all of it. And, we certainly don't want to get into things like, oh, just think on the positive side, or things will be okay. It's fine.
Or it can't be that bad.
Or it can't be that bad. Or
I hate that.
Yeah, it's awful. When we think about like things like toxic positivity is like a buzzword right now, where, but what I can say is one of the things that I talk about in the well-being space a lot is this concept of 3 good things. And I didn't create 3 good things. 3 good things was some research that was conducted, and I read about it, and I just find this absolutely fascinating. But it's really focusing in on gratitude and looking at how good gratitude is for us. So who the heck knew, right? So it's actually good for us to do nice things for others, or to be grateful for things that happen in our day. And so that sounds a little bit like toxic positivity, right? Just be grateful, you'll be fine. But the reality of it is that if you for 2 weeks, every single solitary day for 2 weeks, just take a moment at the end of your day to recall 3 good things that happened to you. That's it. 3 good things. And whatever that means for you. Like maybe I woke up in the morning and made my coffee and it tasted really good this morning.
It was hitting, right?
Yeah, because that doesn't always happen. Or, maybe I didn't hit any traffic trying to drive to work. Or maybe the guy in front of me held the door open when I was walking into 7-Eleven, right? Like whatever it is, it doesn't have to be grand gestures.
You hit all the green lights.
You hit all the green lights, exactly. Or you got to hear your favorite song on the radio, or whatever it is for you, whatever you can identify as being good in your day, and documenting that, relishing in that, because there's
audibly saying it.
Yeah. Right. Say, wow, I had these 3 good things that happened to me today, and they were this, this, and this. And the study and the research goes is that, folks that were for 2 weeks documenting every day 3 good things had positive impact into them physiologically and psychologically for up to 6 months after they did this 2-week trial of just documenting good things. And, it sounds kind of cheesy, but, the reality of it is that, again, it's having that response in your brain to recognize that things aren't always doom and gloom. Like, yeah, you might turn on the TV right now and every station has something about politics and, what I can't even say what I wanted to think.
Everything.
Flu season and vaccines and oh my goodness, there's all this horribleness and there's arrest in, foreign lands and, who the heck knows who's in charge here and whatever. But, you know, it's overwhelming. So, you know, and we can become very obsessed and very smothered by the overwhelm. I know that if I open, you know, Google to search something on my phone, it's going to probably pop up all kinds of doom and gloom things because I've been sitting here talking about suicide for an hour and a half, you know. But the idea of three good things is that if you document good things that happen and you're actually like writing them down, that you can have positive effects. And that goes along with recognizing that, you know, doing good things is good for us.
Yeah,
or having
right.
gratitude or being aware of pleasantries around us, because they get very smothered by
Right.
all the crap and all the garbage.
And that sounds like the kind of work that you can, like, if you're a person who has struggled with suicidal thoughts or in the past has struggled but are okay right now, that's a good practice to get into, so you can start building that buffer of like positivity a little bit, because
not everything is terrible.
Right, because
you know?
again, it's like, how do you identify? But again, if you're listening to this and you've been in that headspace before and you just heard the exercise Amanda was saying, now's the time. Start applying it, because you never know when you're going to be in that headspace again, and you don't have to be.
Right.
And this may make it so you're never in that headspace again. Just this little detail.
Absolutely.
You know?
And just gratitude is good for us. We are, you know, we're constantly overwhelmed with negative thoughts, negative information. We've got forest fires and homicides and missing kids and crime TV and, you know, all of these just very
we need the money,
horrific things.
We need the money to go positive. Right now, the money is negative. I'm serious.
It's
the
true.
only thing that makes money is upset. So everyone is so upset and throttled up. And here's the joke, is it's purposeful. Every single person can make $1 million if they can tell you a good story, you can believe it, and you'll give them fucking money. And it's like, that's what's selling, is upset. But we're going to sell good vibes and happiness and sanity. As much as we can.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
Do you got anything that you want to plug or anything? I mean, you don't.
No, I mean, we talked about Path to Happy, thepathtohappy.com.
Eventually, I want you to do a podcast. Like, not the lounge.
Right.
But you ought to do like a
little wellness, little wellness thing, little tips
We've
and tricks.
talked about that.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, there's lots to talk about. I mean, there's so much to talk about in this space. And again, so much of this has become very mainstream, if you will. And sometimes I have to question, like, do I feel that way because I'm immersed in this world, or are people constantly hearing about mindfulness and self-care and wellness?
No,
and
I've
well-being
heard about it a lot lately.
Yeah, it's
so
everywhere.
I know
it's everywhere right now.
But
It's
again,
very loud. If you
I
will.
do think,
based on drumming for wellness is a big thing.
Well, you know, we didn't even get into that, but we can talk about that. You're right. I mean, that's a big deal. There's sound healing. There's drums. There's rhythm techniques that all go into healing, and
it's amazing.
Isn't that interesting to think about? Absolutely,
sweetheart. Watch the show.
Yeah,
my whole life for the last 10 years has been obsessing over. Well, for the last since 2000,
right?
Whatever that is, 24 years.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, I love you to death. I appreciate you. I think you do important work. Thank you for wrangling in Woe Davis. Do you got anything to say?
No, I mean, thanks for coming in. I know we've been talking about this for a little while. This was all Amanda's creation.
Yeah, no,
I get
it was
that,
her idea.
I
It was
mean,
good stuff.
again, because me and Brian, hits close to home, but we're still both of us kind of oblivious to everything we discussed today.
Christ, I didn't even know about 9.
Right, yeah.
988.
I mean, just you being here, I learned a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
good
hope
shit.
everyone that's listening will learn a lot and maybe can put any of it to use.
Yeah. And watch your young kids. Like I said, that's the biggest thing, is just talk to them. Just be genuine. Talk to them genuinely. Like, remember what it was like to be a kid, and try to understand.
And then translate that in today's world.
Right.
You're a natural, babe.
Yeah. I will say one last thing is that, I am very interested in working with people, helping people, talking to people about wellness and about well-being. So, I think that's my biggest plug out there is that, if you or your company or your, I don't know, whoever is out there listening.
Yeah, right. It's not just an individual.
Yeah,
it's a corporate or not a corporate, a corporate culture, I guess. I mean, your employees.
Yeah, right.
Need a little.
You own a small business and you want to fix morale and boost productivity. Trust me, like going about it in a way of looking at
a structured
wellness
way.
and helping people.
You just had you spoke back in May in Ocean City. What was that conference?
Oh, gosh, you're gonna put me on the spot, but no, that was actually really a great fun thing to do. Someone reached out to me and asked me to come speak. Looking at it was a combination of folks from Maryland and Delaware that work in a section of healthcare that people probably don't traditionally think about. And it's like kind of behind the scenes folks. And I got to go and speak to them and give a presentation on wellness. And it was really fun because I kind of took the approach of thinking about these highlights of these words that we all kind of throw around nowadays of, well-being, self-care and, boundaries and, and kind of did an audience of involvement of like, who's heard this word before? And everybody raises their hand. Of course, they've heard the term self-care. Like, who practices self-care? And like, nobody raises their hand, those types of things. And then talking about that, because again, when we talk about suicide prevention, when we talk about self-care, when we talk about well-being, when we talk about caring for each other, it's not just enough to say that we're going to do these things, but we have to be intentional. Sure. Whether you make a plan or whether you decide to start doing something and stick with it, but it's the intentionality that matters, because we are all aware of mindfulness. We've heard that term. We know what it means, but are we truly being mindful? Not so much, so I did. I had another opportunity to speak to a group of folks that are some women in recovery. And that was just an amazing group of women. They gather for a support group. And I was asked to come speak to them about mindfulness, actually. And it was just a really great opportunity. And, it was chill. I sat in a chair in a circle with some women and we had this amazing conversation. And, so sometimes it is standing up in front of an auditorium full of people and giving a talk. You know, and sometimes it's literally kind of like just sitting next to somebody and just being a regular human.
Well, you had a bonus at Ocean City. You got to see Making Waves.
Oh, snap.
Oh, yeah. Making Waves was there.
You weren't there, right?
No, I wasn't. I was home with the dogs and the kids.
Right.
That's another thing I'll plug. But everybody already knows, but Making Waves is good for your mental health.
Absolutely.
Yes, they are.
Absolutely.
You gotta. That's
they
for
really
real.
are.
Yeah, the vibes.
Like, I'm not just saying that.
It's true.
The vibes of that band, baby. Actually, Reisterstown. We just played.
Andy. He. Once we introduced Making Waves to Andy Wilhelm.
Oh yeah.
He was out there dancing.
I know.
Front row.
He's like all in.
He's obsessed now. He was at Ocean City not long ago.
Right, that's the guy right
they
here.
were sending
He
pictures
came up
to
to me.
us.
Well, it was so funny because that's the guy. The very first week, the very first episode we released, or maybe the second week, I played Fagers in Ocean City. I'm drumming and it's packed. And all of a sudden, this guy that I've never seen before is going, Sanity Lounge. Sanity. And I'm drumming. I'm going, holy shit. I'm going, yeah. I'm like, holy shit.
I'm getting
I'm in Ocean
recognized.
City. I don't even know. Like, we're everywhere, baby.
Right.
Like, right. And I get off, and then he's like,
Yeah.
I'm Will Davis's friend. I was like, oh.
that's awesome.
I'm like,
That's
it was cool,
hilarious.
but
Yeah.
for a second, I'm like, holy shit.
But that's
like,
fact. Making waves is good for your mental health.
Nice.
Yeah.
Check
Good
them out.
stuff. Good stuff.
And
We
anytime you
thought that
can.
you got recognized recently for being on the podcast, but it was actually just a woman looking for her husband, and she thought that he was you.
Oh, yeah.
Remember?
said
Was
yes.
that at the Oriole game?
At the Oriole game.
Yeah.
We really thought like he was
That's
getting
nice.
recognized.
Yeah.
He said
So
Sanity Lounge.
I
They
was like,
said-
oh, look. I was like, I think someone's recognizing Davis from.
Yeah.
No,
We're
she
getting
just,
out there. Like I
It'll
just told you
happen,
about
though.
She was
that,
looking for a
at the,
husband.
we have cards now, so if we see you out and about, we may give them to you.
Yes.
But a dude was wearing a Crack the Sky shirt when I was in Home Depot the other day, and I ended up talking to him, giving him a card, and he listened to the Glenn Workman
I
episode
love
and,
that.
Sure
and
did.
liked it so much that he called and left me a voicemail
That's wonderful.
about
amazing.
it.
It's amazing.
And
That's
it's
what we
funny
need.
because Glenn talked about that in the episode where he's like, you don't see him often, but every now and then you see somebody wearing a Crack the Sky shirt.
T-shirt.
Like he came walking up, and so I was at self checkout, and I saw him walking up, and then I was kind of done, so I left, and he was at self checkout. But I walked out and I went to my truck. I had some cards there. I was like, man, if I don't talk to this guy, I'm gonna regret it.
Sure.
So I pulled up, and he walked out, and I'm like, hey man, nice shirt, and like we just talked about it. And he knew exactly who Glenn was because he's like, was he wearing shoes? I'm like, no, he was not.
That's awesome.
It was great. It was, but yeah, I mean,
That's awesome.
All good stuff. Well,
All good stuff.
we're going to wrap it up.
Yep.
I appreciate everybody. Stay sane, Baltimore, man. You stay sane, Baltimore.
you're a natural, babe.
Check on each other.
Yeah,
We're out.
be present.
Thanks for listening, Baltimore. You can find us at www.sanitylounge.com or on Instagram at sanity.lounge.
Keep listening and subscribe.
Stay sane, Baltimore.